It's good to see you. I have a fun story for you today. It's called It's a Prank, and it's a YA romance novel. Now, I don't normally write YA books, but back in 2019, when author collaborations were all the rage, I was invited to be part of the Sweetwater High young adult series. And I couldn't pass it up because I grew up reading the Sweet Valley High romance novels with Elizabeth and Jessica, the twins, and I was like loving them. And I just adored them. So I had a huge collection and I was trying to get every single number. There was like 100 and some odd books. I was all over it in honor of Jessica and Elizabeth. I did not include twins in my novel though, although my characters do have blonde hair, but it's blonde, naturally curly hair like my daughter's. At the time I wrote this book, she was playing accelerated softball and she was a catcher. And so a lot of what you'll see in this book derives from my experience with her in that wonderful world of softball. I still love the sport, but my daughter fell in love with horses. And once your girl falls in love, she has to follow her heart. So she does rodeo now. But we look back on that time with a lot of fondness, and we really, really loved and admired her coaches and all the parents on the team. And it was such a great environment for her to be in. And we're so grateful for all the time and effort that they put in. So without further ado, I'm going to send you into It's a Prank. And I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you on the other side.
It's a Prank, a young adult novel. Written by Lucy McConnell. Narrated by Joyce Dimmick. Chapter 1. Summer. I threw my catcher's mask into my gear bag and glanced up to find Coach Mackenzie staring down at me. Her platinum blonde hair was still slicked back into a neat ponytail, which was a huge contrast to the hair falling out of my braid and into my face. Catcher's masks weren't made for beauty queens. Small beads of sweat broke out on my hairline. Practice was over and I was less than fresh, but I knew what was on the hitting coach's mind, and it wasn't good. Yeah. Mackenzie rolled a softball around in her hands as she stared at me. Look. I shouldn't say anything, but the other coaches have been talking. Crap. I fumbled my grip on the zipper as it stopped suddenly and couldn't go any farther. Your swing has gone stale. If you can't get it fixed by tryouts, we're going to have to cut you. We'd just started winter workouts in the basement of the high school to prep for tryouts in 2 weeks. With 17-foot ceilings and a lot of open space divided by nets, we could practice fielding grounders, pitching, and batting rotations. The place was something out of a horror movie with cement walls and support beams, bad lighting, and a cracked floor. It didn't help that the far corner was a storage space for the theater department. The sets and props from the 1980s were piled up in heaps. The eyes on a Hello Dolly playboard followed us as we ran the track to warm up, like a creepy stalker who made you shiver. And I loved this place. It smelled like an old sock and never quite got up to temperature, but it provided us the chance to practice when the weather was icky. This was my senior year. I wasn't giving up my shot at a scholarship or the chance to take my team to a state championship without a fight, no matter what the coaches had been saying behind my back. I'm the best catcher you've got, you know that. I wanted that senior jersey with snow across the back so bad I could smell the plastic bag it came in. Every player has to contribute at the plate. You know that. That's how we win championships. I dropped my chin to my chest. The last softball championship Sweetwater High won was my sophomore year, not long enough ago that it was legend, but not close enough to skate by on. I'd caught 2 games in that tournament and earned the nickname Blonde Wall because nothing got by me. All right. I'll meet you here whenever you want. Coach Mackenzie shook her head. I can't coach you outside of winter workouts, it's against district rules. I groaned. Stupid district advisors and their fear one girl would get an advantage over another. I get it. I do. It wouldn't be objective for Coach Mackenzie to spend more time on me than on some other girl, but still. Can you give me some pointers now? I'll do what I have to do. I worked hard to keep the desperation out of my voice, but some might have leaked out. You need time at the plate. You don't get as much in practice as the other girls. She was right. I spent most of my time catching bullpens for the pitchers. Maybe Maisie could throw for me. Maisie was my closest friend on the team. We'd played on all the same accelerated teams growing up. She hadn't pitched since our freshman year when they'd put her at shortstop. We talked about going to the same college, wearing the same uniforms until we became coaches. Mackenzie held up a hand. She'll set you up with easy pitches to make you look good. You need to get into the cages and work on your timing. A solid 2 weeks' worth of practice would have you up to snuff. Timing. Got it. Finally, something specific. I can do timing. I grinned and offered her a fist bump. She left first while I figured out why my zipper had snagged. My batting glove was caught in the teeth. I hoped that wasn't a sign. I headed for the tunnel that would take me to the parking lot. Maisie sent Tommy, one of the other pitchers, ahead and waited for me at the door. She must have seen Coach pull me aside. Great. How many other players had seen our exchange? A fire of gossip could start from much less, especially with tryouts less than 2 weeks away. Girls were always trying to one-up each other, and getting in someone's head could ruin their tryout. Maisie pulled the rope that lifted the door high enough that we could duck under. It clattered loudly, making it impossible to hear one another. As the unholy noise died out, Maisie brushed off her hands. What is up with Coach? I flipped my long braid over my shoulder. She wants me to work on my swing. Even with Maisie, I couldn't admit how precarious my position was on the team. I had 2 sisters who looked up to me. What would I tell them if I failed? I gritted my teeth. I would not fail. I'm going to head over to the park. I checked the time on my phone. I was supposed to pick up my sisters after practice, but they wouldn't be done until 9. If I hustle, I can get a half hour in. I'd put on a good face for Coach. That's what you do. You tell Coach you got it, you'll practice more, and you put your nose to the grindstone and make it happen. It's what I'd done my whole life. But there was only so far that hard work and determination could take me. The problem was, the only indoor cages in town were at Home Run Park, the arcade, mini golf, and batting cages set up to entertain tourists. The locals like going too. My family had gone several times, before Dad decided family life was boring and left to find adventure beyond his 3 daughters and adoring wife. Needless to say, he wasn't my favorite person. My problem right now wasn't my absent father, it was that batting cost money, and that was one thing we Snows were constantly short on. Mom did great paying the bills, and Dad was good about paying for softball gear for me and my sisters, along with the occasional camp or tournament fee. 2 weeks of extra practice at the park? Not in the budget. Addison pulled her shoulders up to her ears and grinned. You sure you can practice there? Gabe closes up every night. I rolled my eyes. Police. Like some pretty boy ball player is going to turn my head. Besides, he's too much of a snob to talk to the likes of me. Gabe Washington and I didn't run in the same circles, yet I was always aware of him in a way that drove me insane. I'd walk into a classroom on the first day of school and, like I had some sort of Gabe radar, I'd pinpoint him sitting near the back of the class with his baseball buddies. The same thing happened in the cafeteria, at a pep rally, or an assembly. I couldn't get rid of the guy. He was in my honors English class, college-level history and chemistry, and regular math. It didn't help that the softball and baseball teams traveled together to away games either. The bus ride put us in smaller quarters and made it all that much easier for my Gabe-dar to find him. You'd think, after being shoved into so many situations together and having so much in common, that we'd eventually speak to one another. But we didn't. He never so much as looked my direction. His family had money coming out their ears, and mine had regular old earwax. We weren't meant to mingle. Maybe I could cut a deal with Gabe's dad and trade time for time. He seemed like a good guy, always volunteering with the baseball team and sponsoring both the softball and baseball teams each year. I'd heard him say he loved nurturing young athletes to be all they could be. Either that was a load of rich people bull garbage, or he would be willing to work with me on this. I hated that my fate rested in his gold fingers. Ugh. Maybe I should have made a point of being Gabe's friend. He definitely had perks. I threw my bag into the back of my ancient vehicle, noted the rust that fell from the back bumper to the pavement as I slammed the trunk, and dug my jacket out of the back seat. The weatherman had promised we'd have a spring full of sunny days within the week. I hoped he was right. Maisie opened the driver's side door to her mom's van. Her family sank everything they had into pitching lessons for Maisie, so she rode in my death trap or borrowed her mom's car to get to practice. If anyone can withstand Gabe's hotness, it's you. Ah. I cocked a hip and tipped my head. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. I only speak truth. She held up the live long and prosper sign. I gotta go. I still need to find another source for that English essay. I waved goodbye and ducked into my car, feeling the rip in the seat grab at my pant leg. One of these days, the seat would win our little tug-of-war and I'd end up giving the world a nice view of my hot pink underwear. I checked the dash clock as I prayed for the engine to chug to life. I had to finish my essay too, but first, I needed to get in good with the team's biggest sponsor. Chapter 2. The home run park parking lot was dark and almost empty. February wasn't a big time for tourists, so they had limited hours. I recognized Gabe's truck next to a Jag. His family drove beautiful, shiny, big-engine cars. I found a spot as far away from theirs as I could get, just in case rust was contagious. I was pushing it by getting there so late, but my car couldn't go faster than 40 miles per hour. Sometimes I wonder if my mom bought a car with a speed cap on purpose. She worked a lot and didn't have time to monitor things like my driving skills. Since I was the firstborn, I swear every move I made toward adulthood was scary for her. Speaking of scary, the atmosphere inside the park's arcade was so tense I could have bludgeoned it with a bat. My Gabe-dar kicked on and I found Gabe and his dad standing behind the counter, their faces red. They must not have heard me come in, because neither backed down to welcome the customer. They looked so much alike that they were like Gabe and future Gabe locked in a battle of wills. Both had wavy brown hair and brown eyes with olive skin. Their jaws were hard, chiseled with determination. Mr. Washington wasn't as broad in the shoulders as Gabe, and he had a little bit of a belly, while Gabe's stomach was washboard ready. Not that I'd checked out his abs. It just so happened that guys tended to take their shirts off after a big game and I had been in the general area once or twice. Mr. Washington had his hands on his hips and his nostrils flared. You need to get your head on straight. I'm doing fine. I just want to get off early. You have no idea what it's like being grown up. How can I not? You won't stop yelling at me about it. Gabe. Okay, clearly this was not the time to ask for a favor. I stepped backward, blindly reaching for the door with my right hand. I couldn't take my eyes off the two of them fighting. It was like watching a train wreck, horrible but fascinating. Instead of the door handle, I whacked a display of children's sunglasses and knocked the whole thing over. The glasses clattered to the ground and the tube made a hollow boom that went through me like a nuclear blast. I dropped to my knees, my face burning in humiliation. In my defense, it was made of cardboard. Let me help, said Mr. Washington as he crouched beside me. He must have run around the counter while I was dying of mortification and unaware of my surroundings. I'm so sorry. I picked up a pair with lime green frames and then another with yellow. It's all right. We'll get it cleaned up in no time. His voice was calm, nice even. My heart rate began to slow down. You're Summer, right? You play catcher for the Pride. He talked as we cleaned up. He really was good at his job. The cardboard tube was upright and he filled it with glasses, putting them in according to colors so they looked like an all-seeing rainbow. Yeah. I tucked some stray hair behind my ear and glanced over my shoulder at Gabe. He had his head down over a math book, his pencil poised above a sheet of lined paper. If I was going to ask, this was the time. Tryouts are coming up, and I was hoping to get some extra hitting practice in tonight. I think we can squeeze you in. He smiled at his dad joke. It's $15 for an hour. Gabe can ring you up. He stood, and I followed, still holding the green and yellow glasses in my hands. My average level math brain added up 2 weeks of daily practice pretty quick, and my wallet chirped in that it wasn't holding the $150 necessary. See, the thing is, I was hoping maybe I could work a trade of some sort. Trade? His face clouded over as if he'd never heard the word before. Heaven help me, I was going to have to explain the barter system my family pretty much operated on to survive to a rich man with his stuck-up son listening in. Mortification was a small price to pay for making the team. My whole future was riding on this. I had to sell my idea or go down swinging. Although, I'd rather not strike out ever again. The whole point of this was to get my swing back. I can work here in exchange for the time in the cages. I glanced down at the glasses in my hand and added them to the display. I stepped back to admire my work and realized that I'd put the green glasses in the pink line and the yellow ones in the blue. I stepped in front of the display to hide my error. Or if you need a babysitter or something, I can make that happen. His lips twitched. I'm tempted to take you up on the babysitting. Gabe doesn't understand the need to finish a shift, and I can't stick around to make sure he keeps the place open. He rubbed the back of his neck as he glared at his son. I tried not to look at Gabe. I mean, who wants a witness when their parent is calling them out? But my eyes have a mind of their own when he's in the room, and they zeroed in on him. He kept his head down, his pencil gouging into the paper. I didn't mean Gabe. If you have younger kids, I trailed off, grabbing the end of my braid and twirling it around my fingers. It wasn't until I stopped talking that I remembered Gabe was the youngest in his family. Stupid. Anyway, I'm a hard worker and catch on quickly. Mr. Washington shook his head. I'm sorry. As a sponsor for the team, I can't give preferential treatment to any player. Even Gabe's friends have to pay when they come in. I nodded, dropping my hands from my hair. I understand, I mumbled. I did. There were rules for a reason. It just felt like the only reason those rules were in place was to stop me from making the team. I swallowed the lump that formed in my throat. Thank you for your time. Good luck at tryouts. Mr. Washington checked his watch. I'm leaving, he called to Gabe. Bye. Gabe didn't look up from his homework. Hey, Summer. Do you have a minute? I pointed to my chest. Gabe Washington was speaking to me, in front of his dad, on purpose. I glanced around to see if there was another Summer in the room, unable to make a coherent sound. Did you see what Mr. Larson said to do for number 8? I couldn't seem to wrap my head around the fact that Gabe Washington knew my name. It wasn't like Sweetwater was that big of a city, and yet I'd never gotten so much as a chin lift as we passed in a deserted hallway. I stood there, blinking like police lights were in my eyes. Gabe's head came up, and I was caught in the direct gaze of his deep brown eyes. I'd never looked into Gabe's eyes before, never had a reason. My heart fluttered and the beeps and boops from the games faded into a soft hum in the background, drowned out by the blood rushing through my veins. It was too much to take in all at once, and I had to look away. When I finally focused, I found Gabe's dad looking at me funny. Are you in the same math class? I nodded and whispered, yeah. It's okay if you stay to help him, he encouraged. Yeah. Okay. I shuffled towards the counter, feeling like a runner caught between two bases. I wanted to turn back and speed for the door, but Mr. Washington stood there, watching us. Ahead was Gabe, tapping the eraser against the book as he waited for me. Why were my feet moving so slowly? The glass display case, where they had all the trinkets for kids who won tickets to exchange, was cool to the touch. I stared at the bottom button of Gabe's work shirt. It was dark blue and made his arms look tan and muscular. I knew the color of the shirt shouldn't matter in the way of muscle definition, but this one somehow did. Gabe was looking over my head. Play along, he muttered, his lips hardly moving. I don't remember how to find the reciprocal, he said, loud enough for his dad to hear. I nodded. So the easiest way to find the reciprocal of a fraction is. Okay, he's gone. Gabe flipped his book shut and leaned on the counter with both hands. My mouth hung open from the unfinished sentence, and I snapped it shut and scowled. Who did he think he was, using me to break up a fight with his dad? So uncool. Look. I get not wanting to be chewed out, but I don't want to be dragged in the middle of a family feud. His eyes rolled over my face. But you want to hit, don't you? I wished my pride was stronger and held my indignation together better, but it slackened. I lifted a non-committal shoulder. You wanted to make a trade, I'll make you a deal. He straightened, folding his arms and making his biceps look twice as big. I hated myself for noticing. The thing was, Gabe was hot. Addison wasn't joking about his effect on the female population of Sweetwater High. He'd dated half the mean girls, MGs for short, and flirted with the rest. The cheerleaders were firmly on Team Gabe, and even the softball girls tripped over themselves to sit by him on the bus. Any one of them would give their hair care products for the chance to make a trade of any kind with Gabe. Unfortunately for him, I wasn't part of his fan club. I'm not doing your homework. My what? He shook his head. No. Not that kind of trade. I narrowed my eyes. Then what? His arms dropped and he leaned over the counter, inviting my confidence. The scent of men's body wash hit my nose, all musky and spicy and yummy. I took a deep breath in before I could stop myself. My Gabe-dar turned into a sniffing machine. My lips dried out, and I had to moisten them. Had he noticed me sniffing him? Gag. That was so embarrassing. I need to get out of here early. But there's a checklist a mile long, and my dad is on my tail. He'll inspect everything in the morning. I rolled my hands one over the other. So. I let you hit for the next half hour, then you clean the bathrooms while I close out the register, and we can both be out of here in an hour. A half hour was less than I needed but more than I was going to get without his help. If his dad had made the offer, I would have jumped at it. Coming from Gabe, the whole thing felt like a frame-up. Why do you want to leave early? Why do you want the extra practice? I clamped my lips shut. No way was I going to tell him my spot on the team depended on it. Gabe didn't let his swing go stale. Gabe didn't have to do drills on the weekends. His spot on the team was as sure as his big old allowance. Still, I didn't like the idea that I was helping him sneak around. I told you, I don't want to get in the middle of your family drama. No one will know. What about the cameras? They had them all over the building. And the cash register totals. Your dad will know I didn't pay. I'll pay. Is this a prank? I fisted my hand. He smirked. You'll have to play to find out. I could call his bluff. Is it worth $150 to you? I want every night for 2 weeks. Totally worth it. He stuck out his hand and his lips twitched. I hate cleaning toilets. Gag. I lived in a house of all girls. I couldn't remember ever having to clean a toilet after boys had been in there, but I'd heard plenty of horror stories from Addison, who had 3 younger brothers. I gulped. He was totally pranking me, the bathroom had to be disgusting. I can do hard things, I told myself. I eyed his hand for a minute, noting the calluses from gripping a bat, before sliding my hand into his and sealing the deal. A zap went up my arm and I jerked away, wondering if it was him or me who had built up the static electricity. Probably me when I'd been crawling around on the ground retrieving sunglasses. Here. He reached down and retrieved a light blue and cream bat and a matching helmet from under the counter. I'll set you up in number 4. All right. I headed to the cages, ready to let some of my frustration out on unsuspecting softballs. I windmilled my arms, checking to see if I was still loose enough from practice to jump right in. My arms felt fine, it was my stomach that was in knots. So many things could go wrong with this deal. If Gabe's dad found out and told the coaches, I'd be off the team. What had I gotten myself into? Chapter 3. Curses. I snapped as I repositioned my feet behind the plate. The softball hit the pad behind me with a thud and dropped to the ground, where it rolled to the edge of the cage. I was 5 for 35. As far as I could tell, my timing was fine, it was making contact that was the problem. Everywhere the balls flew, my bat did not. The phrase "can't hit the broadside of a barn" ran through my head like ticker tape. I swung at the next ball. The machine was relentless. It didn't care if I stepped out of the box or lost my cool, it just kept throwing balls my way. My stomach muscles were going to hate me tomorrow for pushing so hard. I didn't care. I also didn't care that I was yelling at the machine. The lack of an audience should have been freeing, but instead, I found it unnerving. The only thing to concentrate on was my failure. I couldn't blame the pitcher for throwing a great strike. I couldn't blame the catcher for jawing in my ear. I couldn't even blame the fans for being too loud or distracting. It was just me inside my head, and I didn't like what I saw at all. I swung again, my bat cutting through the air. Gah! I let out a scream. I'd never do that on the field, but I was just so angry at myself for screwing this up. Suddenly, the chug-chug of the machine cut off and the lights dimmed. "Time's up," called Gabe from the door. I tucked my chin and ripped the helmet off my head as I stormed out, slamming the cage door behind me, making the chain link rattle. "If I'd have known you'd be angrier after hitting, I'd have made you clean first." "Shut it." I shoved the bat and helmet at him. He could put them away. Not all of us can be born into greatness. What's that supposed to mean? He didn't miss a step or stumble as he kept up with my stomping fast footsteps. I had no idea where he wanted me to start, so I headed to the bathrooms, figuring he wouldn't follow me into the women's. Then again, he cleaned them, so he'd been in there before. Of course, baseball comes easy to you, you can tune up your swing whenever you want. I flicked a hand back to the cages. Not all of us have a training camp in our backyard. "Hey, I work at ball too." "Yeah, right." I held out my hand. "Give me the checklist so I can get started." He pulled a folded piece of paper out of his back pocket. It was warm on my palm. I didn't want to think about his body temperature or being close enough to know what his skin felt like as his fingers brushed my hand. I gritted my teeth. Why was I such a scatterbrain around this guy? So he had money. So what? That didn't make him any better than me, and it didn't make him a rock star like the girls treated him at school. I was not going to let him get in my head. "Cleaning products are in that closet." He pointed to a door between the men's and women's bathrooms, his face a mixture of emotions. Some I could name, others were unfamiliar. "Do a good job or don't bother coming back tomorrow." I scrunched my face at his back as he walked away. Jerk. Then I glanced at the camera in the corner and cringed. Hopefully he didn't think to watch the playback. Shaking my head, I opened the closet door and rifled through the supplies. I needed to hurry. My sisters would be done soon, and I didn't want them hanging around in the cold after their workouts. I grabbed a pair of disposable gloves, screwed up my courage, and headed into the men's room. The place wasn't as bad as I'd thought it would be. There was a funny smell coming from the round things in the urinals, but I figured that's what they were made to smell like. Gross. As I worked, I went through my good at-bats, the ones from last year when I was on top of my game. I tried to remember what it felt like to hit the ball with a solid ting. Instead of the triumph I expected to feel at the memories, all I got was a black ball of disappointment in myself for having slid so far backward. I had to think of something else. The first subject that popped into my head was my argument with Gabe. I couldn't have been the first person to begrudge him being born into the perfect family. His dad had played in the minor leagues. His mom was on the city council. He had a brother who'd gone off to college or something and lived in a house on the beach. What did he expect? Right in the middle of spraying the toilet bowl cleaner around the rim, I recognized the look on Gabe's face that I'd been unable to place earlier. It was hurt. I'd wounded Gabe Washington. What the heck? The knowledge sat on my conscience like a dropped third strike that cost us a run. The trouble was, I didn't know how to fix it or even if I should try. Groveling never came easy to me, and Gabe had more confidence than my whole team put together. Still, I wasn't raised to stomp all over people. Mom expected us to care about others' feelings. I'd apologize when the time felt right. Certainly not tonight, when he was already in full-on jerk mode. But soon. Chapter 4. Hurry! I called to my little sisters as I pulled up to the curb outside the junior high and popped the trunk. Kaylee and Grace tossed their bags in and both climbed in the back seat. Oh no. I'm not your chauffeur. One of you get up here. Kaylee, the older of the two, made the switch. Though my sisters were born 11 months apart, they ended up in the same grade and on the same teams. People often thought they were twins, but Kaylee was taller by 2 inches and kept her hair shoulder length, while Grace had more curves than the two of us put together and wore her hair to her belt like me. We scrimmaged with the guys tonight. Grace totally threw Trevor out at second. He had no idea it was coming. Yeah. I reached over the seat to give my sis a fist bump. Her response was less than enthusiastic. If I'd thought about it, What? I pressed. What was there to think about? Throwing out a runner at second was the bomb. Grace clammed up, so I turned to Kaylee. What? Kaylee rolled her eyes. She's totally crushing on Trevor. He was so mad when she threw him out that he wouldn't even look at her. Then he's a loser. I glanced in the rearview to see Grace turn her head quickly to the side. Grace, listen. If he can't handle you beating him, then you don't want him. A guy should make you feel good about yourself, not doubt your awesomeness or try to hide it. Says the girl who never dates, Grace grumbled. On purpose. I don't date on purpose. Boys are a distraction I can't afford right now. Police, the team would fall apart without you. Kaylee shoved my arm. Thanks. I held back from telling them about what Coach Mackenzie had said. They didn't need my stress. They did need my advice. Trust me. Staying away from boys and focusing on the game and your grades is what will get you into college. You guys are too young to know the dangers, but I've seen them firsthand. Remember Carol? Carol had been on my accelerated team all the way up until we were 14. Then she started dating a 17-year-old and dropped her friends and softball. She worked full-time at the supermarket now and took classes online to get her GED. She wasn't pregnant or anything, she'd just given up her dreams, all for the sake of some guy. Whatever, Grace muttered. She'd heard the cautionary tale of Carol before. I could talk to a softball and get more of a response than Grace gave from the back seat. No matter. I'd said my piece. They chatted about homework and classes and girls on the team the rest of the way home, making me feel very much like an old woman. I remembered being their age, crushing on guys and dying of excitement when they said hi in the cafeteria. It had been fun. But that all had worn off as I got older. We pulled into the garage, and before anyone could escape, I turned to Grace. It's your night to cook dinner. Mom's shift didn't get over until 10. Family dinners were rare at our house. Most nights it was us girls. We had to watch out for each other. Well, more like I had to make sure they did their homework and chores. I shuddered to think what the house would look like if I didn't prod them along. Grace groaned. I'm down to, 2 pairs of socks and 1 bra. Can you do it? She turned on the full force of her "my life is so hard" pout. I'd been the victim of that pout for her first 4 years of life, before I'd started to toughen up. I had an essay to finish. Of course, if I was sorting and folding laundry, I couldn't write. But, if I threw something in the oven, I could work while it cooked. Wash what's in my hamper too and we'll call it even. Deal. Grace scampered into the house before I could change my mind. I stopped at the deep freeze to pull out a bag of frozen broccoli. If I threw it in the rice cooker first, it would be nicely steamed by the time I pulled the chicken out of the oven. Kaylee moved slower than Grace. Her eyes were unfocused, like her thoughts were a million miles away. "You okay?" I asked as we headed inside. The mudroom was more of a locker room with our gear bags and cleats lined up. I dropped a deodorizer into everyone's shoes and picked up Grace's jacket, which had fallen off the hook. Oh, yeah. She shook herself out of her daze. "I was just thinking about, science." I laughed. "Right. And I can throw a screwball." "What's up?" I retrieved the rice cooker from the pantry and dumped the frozen broccoli in, adding a cup of water and setting it to cook. "Do you ever get tired?" "Yeah. I could drop in bed right now." "Seriously." "Sleep." "I mean, do you ever get tired of being so busy?" "Sometimes, I'd like to just lie on the beach with my friends and get a tan line that didn't make farmers jealous." I chuckled. I had those tan lines too. "No. I'd rather be on the field any day of the week." She dropped her chin. "That's what I thought." I reached for the fridge handle, but something in her voice tugged at my heart. "Kaylee, you have more natural talent than I ever did. You're on your way to greatness. Don't give up." She nodded, her eyes never lifting off the tile floor. "I just need some sleep." She rolled her pitching arm in a windmill. "A warm shower and then sleep." "What about dinner?" "I'm not hungry." She shuffled down the hallway toward her room, not bothering to turn on the light. A second later, I heard her fall on her bed with a grunt. Poor girl. We kept up a harried pace around here. Not only did we have workouts and practices, but Mom expected us to keep our grades high enough to qualify for academic scholarships. She wanted us well-rounded, which meant that we had to pick something besides softball to participate in. Grace sang in the choir. Kaylee did the science fair, she'd taken third this year. I ran with cross-country in the fall, mostly because it didn't interfere with softball and it kept me in shape. I appreciated Mom's goals for us all, but Kaylee had pushed too hard to win the science fair. She'd spent night after night perfecting her poster and going over her presentation. Sleep would be good for her. I'd put a plate in the fridge in case she woke up later and needed dinner. I found the chicken and a cooking pan and assembled Mom's easy chicken bake. Kaylee would be okay. She was going through the burnout stage all athletes hit right before they go into high school. Some drop out, like Carol. Others push through and find a new level of love of the game and ability. I set the timer, brushed off my hands, and sat down at the kitchen table to finish my English essay on the ideal age to get married and have children. One study said getting married between 28 and 32 significantly lessened the chances of divorce. My parents were high school sweethearts and had gotten divorced before they were 30, so I could see the logic behind the study's numbers. Besides, who really knew what love was when they were young? I certainly wouldn't have a clue what it looked like. My thoughts were suddenly overshadowed by the look of hurt in Gabe's eyes tonight. He walked around school like he was the king of the hallways. Seriously, girls changed their class schedules so they would cross paths with him. I shouldn't have been able to cause hurt in his life with a few barbed words. I was a nobody compared to Gabe. I groaned and dropped my head to the pine table with a thunk. I was a good person, he just caught me at a bad time. Plus, he always seemed like a self-absorbed, rich kid jerk. But what if he wasn't? I sat up abruptly. I couldn't spend all night thinking about Gabe. If I bombed this essay, then the best I could get out of the class was a B, and that wasn't going to cut it for the recruiters. It was time to follow my own advice and leave boys alone until after graduation. Chapter 5. What are you doing this weekend? I threw my backpack into my locker and faced Harper. The school day had just started, and her heart-shaped face was full of excitement. Jet's out of town, and I thought we could have a movie night and eat too many peanut butter M&Ms at my house. Sounds great. I grinned. Let's invite Bailey too. The three of us had been best friends since the first day of first grade. Harper's mom had sent her with an alfalfa sprout sandwich. I took pity and gave her half my PB&J. Bailey had offered up her pudding cup, and we shared a bag of chips. Our friendship was bonded tight with sugar and empty carbs, the kind of stuff that lasts through awkward tween years, braces, and boys. Already did. Harper wiggled her phone. I tucked my math book into the crook of my arm and turned down the hall. My stomach was in knots at the thought of seeing Gabe. I'd been able to avoid him when I walked down the jock hall, but there was no avoiding having the same class together. I glanced at the nurse's office as we passed by, wondering if nervousness was enough of a reason to lie on a cot for a half hour. So, what movie do you want to watch? We'd reached the doorway to my classroom. Mr. Larson was one of those teachers who couldn't stand hallway noise and insisted that the door to his room be shut at all times. I rubbed my lips together as I thought about my options while reaching for the door handle. A long, tan arm reached between the two of us. Let me get that for you. A happy little shiver rushed over my skin at the deep voice and gentlemanly action. I stepped out of the way so the door could swing open. Gabe? I asked incredulously. Sup, Summer? One side of his mouth lifted in a half grin. His brown eyes were full of questions and a little bit of hope. And nothing, I replied, ducking into class and making a beeline for my seat. My tongue glued itself to the top of my mouth in surprise. Yes, that was why my heart raced. Surprise that Gabe would acknowledge my presence in public. Harper took the chair next to mine. She grabbed my arm and shook it. What was that? She hissed in my ear. What? I pulled my hair around to one side and wrapped it around my fist, curling the ends. I'd spent all morning making big waves and taming flyaways, so I shouldn't be nervous about how it looked. I tossed it behind me. My Gabedar was doing its thing, following Gabe to his seat on the other side of the room, third row back like he was a dot on a screen in my head. Gabe was watching you, like, the whole time. He almost shut the door on me. I coughed to cover my laugh. Yeah, right. The hottest player on the baseball team was staring at me. A slow, knowing grin crept across Harper's cheeks. I never said he was hot. I rolled my eyes. A leftover from a conversation with Addison. I went to the cages last night to get in some extra batting practice, and she was jealous. Mr. Larson hopped up from his desk. I swear the man lived to torment us with sine, cosine, and tangent formulas. I sat up straighter and flipped open my notebook. If I didn't get an A in this class, I was going to throw a tangent. Feeling a pair of eyes on me, I turned to catch Gabe watching me with his head cocked to the side. When our eyes met, he turned quickly away. My heart sped up to surprise speed again. I did my best to keep up with the teacher as we covered secant, but it took almost all of my concentration not to see if Gabe was watching me again. The stupid thing was, I kind of wanted him to, and that confused me more than the geometry lesson. Chapter 6. Day 2 of practice in the cages consisted of me sneaking in while Mr. Washington's back was turned and Gabe rushing him out the door before I could start hitting. Ugh. I hated sneaking around. It made me feel like the forbidden girlfriend or something. Gabe and I hardly spoke, both of us in a hurry to leave. I still hadn't apologized for saying mean things and totally judging him. He'd been nice enough at school, but it wasn't like we were suddenly best friends. It was more like I was now on his radar, whereas before I'd been invisible. I wasn't sure how to feel about that and ended my session with a scowl. When I was doing my best not to think about Gabe during school, I'd end up stressing over my swing. 2 nights of work hadn't yielded positive results. Whoever said practice makes perfect hadn't sat through one of my sessions. I turned in my English essay, nervous about the teacher's response. I'd reread it right before handing it in and couldn't see any holes. It just didn't feel right, and I couldn't put my finger on why. The third night of cleaning bathrooms and batting practice, I brought my own gear so I wouldn't have to stop at the counter and actually have a conversation with Gabe. I didn't see his dad's Jag in the parking lot, so I figured it was safe to head in. At the last second, I grabbed a Boston ball cap and slapped it over my after-practice hair. I'm no princess on the field, but for some reason, I didn't want to walk in looking like I'd just run a mile, which I had. Coach Hayes made the whole team run because she liked to punish us on a regular basis. I guess that was a head coach's prerogative. The never-ending noise from the arcade games kerpowed and hooped hello as I breezed through the door. Gabe was by the skee-ball machine. He had the front open and was stocking tickets. Stacy hovered over him, bending low so the front of her shirt dropped open. I tripped at the sight of her. Stacy and I didn't have the best track record. We'd tangled in gym class in the 7th grade when she tried to cheat during a soccer game. I'd called her out on it. I can't stand a cheater. Win or lose, you own it. She'd shoved me and called me a 5-letter word. Seeing red, I'd lunged, grabbing her around the middle and throwing her over my back like my dad used to do when I was a kid, only he would hold on to my ankles as I giggled upside down. Stacy landed on the grass with a yelp, cried hard enough that her mascara ran, and never came near me again. It all happened so fast the teacher missed it, and neither of us got in trouble for fighting. It was the only fight I'd ever been in, and I was a little proud of the fact that I'd won. I'd gotten a rep for being tough, and that kept the MGs off my back and away from my friends. It may have frightened a few boys away too, but whatever. If they couldn't handle a strong woman, that was their problem. Gabe's head popped up before I had a chance to interrupt their conversation. "Hey, Summer. What cage?" I asked, not wanting to stand around and chat with my old nemesis. I swear she was plotting ways to murder me in my sleep as she stood mute by Gabe's side. Gabe held up 4 fingers, and I nodded. "Hey, Stacy." I grinned wickedly. Okay, so maybe I wasn't as grown-up as I pretended to be in front of my sisters. The fact that she was here, standing too close to Gabe while he worked, bugged me. She stared at her nails and ignored me. Fine. What's she doing here? Stacy asked as I walked away. My shoulders tightened as I strained harder to hear his answer. Don't tell her, I silently begged him. Stacy wasn't the type of person you trusted with a secret arrangement. Besides, I didn't need her knowing I was too poor to pay my way. Practicing. Gabe's answer must have been good enough for Stacy, because she followed that up quickly with, "Do you want to grab a burger after closing?" I was too far away to hear Gabe's response. I wrinkled my nose at the thought of those two together. 3 days ago, I would have said they deserved each other, but Gabe had opened the door to math class 3 days running, a fact that Harper would not let me forget. And he'd said hi to me several times in the hallway. You'd think after the first time, I wouldn't be so shocked that he considered us acquaintances, but my heart sped up every time. Every time. I cleared my mind as I shut the chain link door behind me. I needed to pull it together tonight. Coach Mackenzie had asked me if I was getting extra practice in. I told her yes, and she looked so relieved it scared me. I knew I was off my game, but the threat of being cut became really real in that moment. I swung at several pitches, missing each. The bat weighed 50 pounds in my hands, making me lumber instead of glide through the movements. I sniffed back the tears. This was no time to cry. I needed to buckle down. Work harder. Push through the wall. I loaded my swing and whiffed it at another ball. It hit the pad behind me and dropped just like my dreams of a scholarship. Do you want to know what you're doing wrong? I jumped at Gabe's voice so close. He was standing on the other side of the door, his fingers hooked in the chain link, all casual and hot. His brown eyes were sharp, like he'd taken a measure of me and I'd come up short. What? I spat as I tapped the end of my bat on the base. Do you want some help? What, you're a batting coach too? I turned away from him, staring at the next ball as it dropped through the machine. I counted the seconds until it released and swung, twisting hard enough that I stumbled. Go away, I told him through gritted teeth. It was bad enough that I sucked, I didn't need Mr. Perfect Swing telling me how. Tears were a real possibility, and I couldn't handle him watching me cry. If you change your mind, let me know. Ugh. He was so calm. So collected. I fouled off the next ball. And the next. Gabe walked to the middle of the room, where the pitching machines pointed outward like spokes on a bike. Each time he dumped a bucket of balls into the grabber, it sounded like hail on a metal roof. I wanted to pat myself on the back for making contact, but a foul ball was far from where I needed to be. Another 10 strikes and I was humbled enough to take anyone's help, even Gabe's. Fine. I called to him. What? He cupped his ear. Just like him to make me beg for it. He offered help earlier, argued the rational side of my brain, and you verbally spat on him. No one asked you. I mentally argued back. This guy was making me insane. I took a deep breath in, willing my anger and nerves and inner turmoil to take a pill and relax. I said I would like a few pointers. He broke into a grin, one that was pure happy, like a kid who opened his lunch to find out his mom had put in Oreos instead of the generic knockoffs. He made his way out of the machine and into cage number 4. I twisted the bat around in my hands. I'd asked for his advice, so it was time to put on my big girl panties and take the criticism. Gabe hit the pause button on the wall and turned, folding his arms. All right, get up to the plate. I gritted my teeth, because they started to tingle the minute his warm voice floated over my skin. My mouth went dry and my legs were weak at best. I wouldn't be able to hit a ball if it was coming right at my face, not with him looking so intently at me. Swing, he commanded. I did, feeling stupid and awkward. I pulled the bat back to my right shoulder. Gabe moved to stand behind me. I thought he was going to watch me swing again, so I loaded my swing. Instead, his arms came around me and his hands covered mine on the bat. What are you doing? Heat filled my neck and my face, rising like the red line of a thermometer. Gabe was everywhere. His breath was on my neck. His spicy warm scent was in my nose. His hands were firm and warm over mine. My brain buzzed, total Gabe overload. I'm leveling out your swing, he said, his voice right next to my ear. Soft. Sweet. Deep. He pushed against the bat and brought it around. It wobbled, but that was my fault. My arms were stiff. I prayed he wouldn't notice. Would you relax? Crap. He'd noticed. I can't. Not with you literally breathing down my neck. His breath was warm and smelled like mint. Mixed with his body spray, the combo made my knees shake. He went still, and I had the strangest feeling that we fit together just right. He was a couple inches taller, but that made it easier for him to wrap his arms around me. I turned my head and found that our chins lined up. Which meant our lips did too. And I was staring right into his brown eyes, seeing all sorts of Gabe that I'd never seen before. Gabe bumped my forehead with his, playfully. I blinked in surprise. You're not so bad looking when you're not glaring at the world. It took a moment for my brain to process what he'd said. Was that supposed to be a compliment? Gee. Thanks. I added extra sarcasm sauce to my voice and pushed back with my shoulder, creating space between us. Wait, that's not what. Don't. I shook my head quickly. I didn't need to hear him stumble through some sort of explanation as to why he'd thought I was ugly up until that moment. Let's just forget you said anything. He studied me, his eyes delving into mine. I held his gaze, daring him to push it. He didn't. Maybe Stacy had warned him about my temper. He released one arm and tugged on the bat with his other hand. I gave it to him, thankful for the chance to breathe in the rubbery smell of the cages instead of his delicious manly body spray. Dang, it could have rubbed off on my shirt, he'd been so close. I was so going to smell check this shirt when I got home. Even though I had no interest in Gabe Washington, there was nothing wrong with appreciating a well-made product. Gabe got into a batter's stance and swung the bat in slow motion. You're pushing your back shoulder down and compensating by dropping your hands. My brain lit up with the information. I could feel the truth in his words, like my muscles were shouting, yes. We've been trying to tell you this for weeks. Keep your hands closer to your body, and you'll increase your accuracy and power. I mimicked his movements. They felt good. Right. I reached for my bat, anxious to give it a try. It felt like a feather in my hands. Gabe stepped back and pressed the resume button. The machine chugged and clunked to life. I twisted my grip and then loaded my swing. The ball appeared in a flash of neon green. I tracked its progress through the machine until it launched towards the plate. I swung, keeping my hands in and my shoulder up. Ting! The ball sailed right back at the machine with a beautiful arc that would have landed it behind second base. It was a solid single. I spun, grinning at Gabe. Don't look at me. He shooed me with his hands. The next ball's coming. I locked in and swung. Another single, this one over the shortstop. I'd take it. I wanted to jump and scream, but the next ball was already coming. Gabe slipped out of the cage with a rattle of the chain link. I breathed deep, tightening my core for the next swing and repeating his words over and over. Shoulder up, hands close. Shoulder up. Hands close. I didn't get every ball, but I got more than I had the night before. Progress felt so good that I floated. No more sliding back. From here on out, I was going to master my swing. I cleaned the bathrooms in record time and met Gabe by the front door. He was tapping his foot and staring at his phone. Thanks for the help. I smiled. He didn't look up. I glanced down to see Stacy's pic at the top of his screen and back up to see him frown deeply. Is something the matter? What? His head popped up. No. I need to be somewhere. Are you done? Oh. He had a date with Stacy. So that's how it was. When his girlfriend was around or wanted his time, I was invisible. But if she was gone, I was cool enough to snuggle up within batting cage. Whatever. I'm so done. I shoved out the door and into the chilly air, wrapping my coat tighter around me. My car was frigid and my hands shook with the cold as I turned the key once, then again, before it shook to life. It could have been worse. I could have actually liked that jerk. Chapter 7. Ting. The ball shot off my bat 15 feet straight up, where it bounced off the ceiling and landed hard next to my shoe. Not bad, Snow. Coach Mackenzie shook her head. But your timing is still off. I gritted my teeth. Like I couldn't tell that by the stupid foul balls bouncing around the basement like ping-pong balls. With Gabe's tutoring, I could make contact, but I was still behind the ball when facing a live pitcher. Your swing is better. You don't look like you're falling over yourself. Yep. Bite your tongue. Nothing good ever came from mouthing off to a coach. Katie, you're up. Coach Mackenzie yelled over my shoulder, bringing the next girl into her court. I smiled at Katie, a sophomore with an easygoing personality. She had been quiet her first year but was full of funny jokes now. I rolled my bat over my hand like a pro. I so was busy watching Katie hit the ball that I stepped right into Violet Russell's path. I paused, gathered my necessary manners, and stepped around her. Violet and I had both tried out for the catcher position our freshman year. I'd gotten the spot, and she developed a grudge that stuck to her like mud. Violet flipped her low ponytail over her shoulder. Looks like the coaches are finally seeing your true potential. I practically tripped over her snarkiness. She lifted a catcher's mask and tucked it under her arm. The movement dragged my attention to the rest of her gear. Her shin guards were shiny and her chest protector free of the red dirt that puffed out of mine every time a ball hit it. What are you doing in gear? I snapped. I'm catching a bullpen for Maisie. She slipped on her mask, looking fierce. I catch for Maisie. I had caught for her for the last 3 years. Tommy too. That girl was ice on the mound and I loved her determination. Coach asked me to fill in. I guess your batting isn't the only thing that's off this year. My mouth fell open in shock. I wish I was the type of girl who could come up with a quick comeback and act like I had it all together. But I'm not. I'm more of the stuttering, I can't believe you said that mind block kind of a girl. Yeah, I could shove her, but that would only give the coaches another reason to cut me. Which meant that Violet got to walk away with her head held high and her brand new gear creaking in a neener cadence. Violet wasn't a better catcher. She lacked the long-term hustle to take the team to state. Sure, for tryouts she'd put on a show, but get her in a doubleheader in 85-degree weather and she'd wilt like a prom corsage. Summer. Get a move on. Grounders in the back. I blinked out of my shock at Coach Hayes' bark. Great, now I looked like the one without hustle in front of the head coach. Violet must have known Coach was standing there. Coor. On my way, Coach. I jogged to my bag and slid my bat inside, retrieving my mitt. I smacked my fist into the leather, needing an outlet. I had to get my swing back. Unfortunately, the only way that was going to happen was with Gabe's help. YouTube was great, but I needed hands-on coaching, real-time evaluation. Someone to look at what I was doing and tell me how to fix it, because I couldn't see what was wrong. I could ask my sisters. I dropped that thought just as soon as it fell into my head. They were busy with their own things, and in some weird way, I was scared that my bad game would taint them, that it would rub off and be a horrible, twisted legacy. Dad was out of town this week, not that he'd be that much help. He'd long since handed coaching me over to the professionals. Part of that might have been my fault. When I was 12, we were playing catch, and he'd moved out the week before, and I was angry. So when he told me to get my arm up and not sidearm my throw, I let loose, telling him that he didn't know what he was talking about and that he was full of crap. Mom wasn't an option, she'd stopped helping when I bruised her hand with a hard throw. I thought back to the times we'd spent on the field all together as a family. They were my brightest childhood memories. There were other memories that weren't so bright, arguments, hiding behind the couch as people screamed, going to bed without dinner because Mom and Dad hadn't come home, and both trying to avoid the other but not speaking to figure out who was going to take care of the children. I shook my head. Gabe was my only option. Besides, hanging out with him wasn't terrible. It was a pain, he was a pain with his on-off charm. At least he wasn't charming. That would be worse and so fake. No guy was as good as he pretended to be when he was trying to make a good impression on a girl. I'd seen it happen many times before. Except for Harper's, Jet. He was doing pretty good as a boyfriend. Okay, maybe there were a few good guys out there, I had yet to find one, though. And I wasn't looking for a guy. Guys were for after high school when my future was secure. So the question at hand was, how was I going to ask Gabe for help? Because I had the feeling I needed more than a few stolen minutes in the cages to fix this problem. Just the thought of his cocky smile made my eyes roll. He was going to enjoy making me beg. I could feel it. The guy loved to show off. Having one of the softball team's top players come to him for batting advice would be a big old gold star on his forehead. I dug my fingernails into my palm. I could do this. I'd faced down London Torres, aka the freight train, my sophomore year, been thrown off my feet and held onto the ball to get him out. Nothing was scarier than that. Except maybe Gabe Washington putting his arms around me. My mouth went dry at the memory and my cheeks flushed with heat. Yes, Gabe was much scarier than the freight train. Chapter 8. There was no reason to be nervous, and yet my brain had been tripped. I stood in front of the closet the next morning and stared, there was nothing to wear. I mean, there were clothes in there, just none that went well with groveling. My blue shirt with the ruffle sleeves was fantastic for "We just won the game," and my white with yellow flowers t-shirt was perfect for "I aced the test." But there just wasn't anything that said, "I want your pity." Summer. We're gonna be late. Kaylee blasted from the kitchen. Shoot. I grabbed a team t-shirt and pair of tight jeans. My Vans waited by the door. Rushed and red-faced was not the way I wanted to approach Gabe. I didn't really want to approach him at all, but certain factors were what they were, so I was going to have to humble myself and just take all the teasing, snarking, and snobbery he wanted to throw my way. My sisters were already waiting in the car, both in the back seat. Hey! I pointed to the empty passenger seat beside me. Kaylee huffed, groaned, slouched, and then finally melted herself into the seat next to me. Whatever, I snapped. Grouchy much, she fired at me. Says the pot. I poked her shoulder. What's the deal? Grace spoke up from the back seat. We have a double header. Awesome. I grinned into the rearview mirror. Did you forget something? No, Kaylee glared over the seat, clearly telling Grace to shut her mouth. Oh my gosh, I so do not have time to pull this out of you. Just tell me. My sisters could be exhausting when it came to getting information. They gave one-word answers to every question until I asked the right one. Then the dam cracked open and a deluge spewed forth, oftentimes with tears. Kaylee sank lower in her chair. I raised my eyebrows. It's nothing. Steve asked her for help on a math assignment after school. And I can't do it because I have a stupid doubleheader. Kaylee smacked her hand against the seat. Hey! Her words felt like sacrilege. Bats before boys, remember? She threw her hand over her face. I'm so tired of not having any friends. I pressed my lips together. I can't talk to you when you're dramatic. We were getting close to the junior high, and I still hadn't figured out what to say to Gabe. I'm not being dramatic. I'm serious. I want to quit the team. I pulled into the drop-off lane. You're just saying that because you want Steve to like you. Yeah. That's exactly it. I want a boy to like me, and I want to like a boy, and I want to spend time with him outside of school. Grace's face was sympathetic in the rearview. This could not go on. Listen up, I said in my best coach's voice. We don't exactly have the best support group on the planet. Dad is MIA, and Mom is so busy climbing the hospital ladder that it's up to us to make things happen. Softball is your golden ticket. I threw Kaylee a look. We don't throw away golden tickets. I pulled to a stop at the drop-off. Whatever. Kaylee climbed out, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. 2 seconds later, she smiled and hugged one of her friends as if she hadn't been a sulky teen seconds before. Grace put her hand on my shoulder. You don't have to take over for our parents. You know that, right? Yeah, because they're waiting in line to drive you two to school. The words were out without having gone through the filter. Grace's face crumpled. Out of the three of us, she had the fewest memories of Mom and Dad together. Divorce was her norm, which was sad on its own level, but it saved her from comparing the before and after like I did. I'm just saying we're capable of making decisions on our own. Grace ripped her bag off the seat and leaped from the car. I growled out of breath. My parents had it so good. Not only was I the easiest teenager in the world to raise, I took the brunt of my sister's attitudes. They so owed me. But I didn't have time to send them a text telling them what an awesome first child I was, because if I didn't kick it in gear, I'd be late for first period. Whoever thought having math first period was a good idea for anyone in the history of ever was an idiot. I drove a safe 3 miles over the speed limit, swung into a parking spot, and dashed to class. My backpack bounced against my back as I ran, my math book smacking hard against my spine. That was another thing that irked me. I'd never had a math book that weighed less than 50 pounds. Couldn't they figure out how to digitize these babies? I mean, how many children had spinal injuries because of math books? After this trek to school, I'd know of at least one. Grimacing, I slid into my desk and gulped a breath. The bell rang and Mr. Larson hopped up like he couldn't wait one more minute before dumping math facts into our brains. My gaydar beeped, and I realized he wasn't in the room. I scanned quickly for a second opinion, and sure enough, Gabe wasn't there. Great. Just great. I couldn't spend the rest of the day worrying over asking him to help me. That was too much for one stomach to handle. I pressed my hand over my belly. Just as I was about to drop my forehead to my desk in despair, the pretty boy himself strutted into the room. Mr. Larson stopped talking and held out his hand for the tardy excuse slip. Every head turned to see who was late. It didn't faze Gabe to be the center of attention. He kept his chin up and his shoulders back but relaxed in that casual hotness way of his. He didn't even have the chagrin to blush when he shook his head to indicate that he didn't have a late excuse. What was up with that? At least have your mom call the school. They would have let Mr. Larson know he was going to be late, and time wouldn't have stood still when Gabe walked in the room. His eyes met mine, and my heart tumbled around like a ground ball on a crazy hop. He trip-kicked a chair, crashing it into the desk and making way too much noise. I dropped my gaze and ducked behind my hair, embarrassed for him. Mr. Washington, if you could take your seat. I'm working on it, Gabe grumbled. I bit back my giggle. He wasn't flustered often, but Mr. Larson had gotten to him, or maybe it was me. I sneaked a look at him again and caught him looking at me. I whipped my attention back to the front of the room, where there were way too many numbers on the whiteboard and not enough explanations. It wasn't until English class that I had a chance to talk to Gabe. He was sitting in the back of the room by himself, doodling on a sheet of paper. Hey! I sat on the desk in front of him and put my feet on the seat. Hey! He shoved the paper off his desk and into his backpack on the floor. Hey, he said again. Hey! I gave him a look that said knock it off. He was pranking me with this hey thing. Realizing that I wasn't going to get anywhere making faces at him, I smoothed out my expression. So I talked to Coach last night. She says my timing's still off. He nodded. It happens to everyone when they haven't faced live batters for a while. Yeah, well, tryouts are in 10-ish days, so kids started streaming through the door. Any minute now Gabe's buddies would walk in and I'd be back to being the girl who scrubs toilets. Anyway, I was wondering if, maybe, you could help me out. He perked up and then leaned back all casual-like. You want my help? I swallowed so much pride my throat hurt. Yeah, I croaked. He touched his ear and leaned forward. What? Yeah, yes. I'm asking for your help. My gaze traveled over the Shakespeare quote on the wall behind him. Sure. Let's meet downstairs after workouts. He grinned. I yanked my eyes back to his face. If the effect of his smile wasn't so dazzling, I think I would have wiped the cheekiness off his smug face. Lucky for him, he was blessed with 2 doses of gorgeousness. Wait. No. 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 Gabe Washington was not gorgeous. I mean, he was handsome, but I wasn't attracted to him. I certainly didn't think he was gorgeous. That was for girls like Jenny and Stacy, girls who hung on his every word, considered smacking his arm flirting, and giggled at everything he said. Not for me. I was too dedicated to my sport to get caught up in Gabe's delicious brown eyes or notice how his lower lashes curled under. I leaned away, needing the space to see him clearly. This was Gabe. Just like that? I blinked in surprise. His amazing posture slipped. Were you expecting me to say no? His voice had a tone to it, a vulnerability that I wasn't used to seeing on him. It caught me off guard, and I stalled, unable to spit out a funny remark to cover the fact that my foot was in my mouth. I didn't know how I continually hurt him, but I'd done it again. Before I could figure out a way to bring back his cocky smile, because I'd much rather see that than the injury I'd inflicted reflected on his face, James Lowe patted me on the back. Summer, what's up? Not much. I was sitting in his seat, but he made no move to shoo me away. I stayed, trying to appear casual, like I wasn't crossing social boundaries by talking to one of the wealthiest kids in school. I cast a furtive glance at Gabe, begging him not to tell James that I was floundering with the one thing in my life I'd always been able to count on. "Are you coming to my house tomorrow night?" James popped a piece of gum in his mouth, offering me one from the pack. He threw a party every year the weekend before tryouts. It was a good chance to let loose a little before the intensity and insanity started. Violet usually went, and therefore I usually stayed home. No party was worth her drama. "Tomorrow?" I repeated, trying to buy myself some time. "Yeah. Maisie's coming. I think Tommy and Roan will show. I talked to them this morning. I kinda have plans. My girls' night with Harper and Bailey was already planned. Bailey had bought the double-stuffed mint Oreos and ice cream. I was going to make an apple crisp. Harper was all aflutter over the snack situation, since her mom only bought organic cookies that tasted like cardboard and dehydrated jam. "Maybe you could stop in first?" My head whipped around and I stared at Gabe. His mouth wasn't moving, and I was having a hard time deciding if he'd actually said those words or if I had wanted him to say them so much that I'd made them up. "It's supposed to be a good time," he added. My stomach twisted in the most wonderful way. Gabe was actually trying to talk me into going to a party. A party he went to every year. It almost sounded like he wanted me there, and the interest in his eyes, that was all too exciting. Yeah, I think I can make that happen." "Sweet." James offered me a fist bump. My head floated as I concentrated on making contact without looking like I was thinking too hard about it. Because it was definitely difficult to think about bumping fists while also thinking about seeing Gabe in a social situation where there would definitely be flirting. I almost swallowed the gum. Flirting was not my jam. My hands grew moist, and I couldn't come up with anything remotely interesting to say sitting here in class with two cute guys looking at me. How was I going to make it through an hour at a party? "Take your seats, please." Mrs. Banks waved her hand in a circle over her head as if sending birds off to find their roosts. I gave the guys a small smile and shrugged my shoulders like I was disappointed to have to end our little session. Inside, I swore I'd never make fun of Mrs. Banks for wearing polyester ever again, because she'd saved me. If she'd been 2 minutes later, my lack of flirting skills would have been blatantly obvious. I took my seat, mentally growling at myself for saying yes to the dumb party. My momentary weakness was all Gabe's fault. Him and his stupid expressive eyes. They were like a Sweet Valley High book, so easy to read, so easy to get lost in for hours. Besides, he was doing me a favor after school. I couldn't just throw his invitation back in his face. That would have been rude. Yes. That was why I'd said I'd go, because I was trying to be nice to the guy who had more friends than I did. Bailey twisted sideways in her seat so she could talk to me and watch Mrs. Banks at the front of the room. She opened her mouth to say something and then paused, wrinkling her brow. "What's the matter?" I flattened my hand over my stomach in an effort to calm the butterflies that threatened to swarm and destroy. "I'm a complete idiot, that's what." She leaned closer, my barely whispered words not carrying across the desk. "What?" "I told Gabe I'd go to a party tomorrow night." "Oh my gosh, I think I'm going to pass out." I pinched my lips together. The room tipped and I grabbed onto the desk to keep from being thrown out. Bailey mirrored my worried look. Our joint concern over my welfare was well-founded. When I was in the 8th grade, we'd gone to a party together, ecstatic that we were finally old enough to attend boy-girl soirees. The party started out innocent enough with kids taking turns on the Xbox and playing volleyball in the backyard, but once the sun went down, they played spin the bottle. I was so awkward that I'd headbutt Brad McKibbins and gave him a bloody nose. I swore I'd never go to another party again. Bailey suddenly sat up, her eyes bright. "Saturday is our girls' night. You can tell him you're busy." I moaned. "I already tried that. He said to come before." Bailey's shoulders fell. She patted my hand. "Do you want me to come with you?" I shook my head. If I was going to humiliate myself, then I didn't want my good friends to see me do it. They'd hear about it, but they'd believe the best of me for friendship's sake. If they saw it with their own eyes, I'd drop 12 levels of respect. Hey! She took my phone off the corner of the desk. Maybe there's some online help. Mrs. Banks cast a scathing look our direction. Bailey's face was in my phone, so I pasted on an innocent expression and pretended to pay attention. After a few minutes, Bailey set my phone back on my desk. I pulled up a bunch of articles on flirting techniques. Read them all before the party and then practice. On who? I asked. Everyone. You have a school full of boys for test subjects. She spread her hands out. Mrs. Banks had reached her limit. Summer, what did you think of Candy as a character? I sat up in my seat. I'd read the assigned chapters in Of Mice and Men right before falling asleep last night. We'd had another late dinner and my sisters grumbled their way through dishes, making it hard to concentrate. I don't think I like her. Why's that? She pressed. Because I'd seen some of myself in her behavior. Not that I'd flirt with other men when I was married, that was not going to happen, but because I'd enjoyed Gabe's attention, almost too much, and I knew he had a girlfriend. That wasn't cool. Reading about Candy in Of Mice and Men had made me sick to my stomach. Because she wasn't loyal to herself. Mrs. Banks paused. That's very insightful. I glanced over at Gabe. He smiled softly, and I ducked behind my hair, embarrassed to be caught looking at him. Mrs. Banks moved on to her next victim. Bailey bumped my phone closer. Read, she mouthed. I tapped on the first site and scanned the article. Tip number 1, smile. I could do that. I did that too much. When a guy started flirting, I froze with a smile on my face, looking like a demented doll. Tip number 2, dress to impress. I glanced down at my Sweetwater high softball tee and fitted jeans. Dressing up wasn't exactly my specialty. Other girls seemed to get the idea. There were several in class who wore skirts or beach dresses. A few had on blouses. I was pretty much the only one in a t-shirt. Maybe I could step it up, especially for a party. My mom often bought things online for me. I had a pile of Amazon boxes in my closet. There could be something in there that would impress. Smiling and dressing up. Those were doable. Tip number 3, don't hang out in a big group. Guys are more likely to approach if you are alone. I chewed my lip, unsure how to put that one into play. It was a party. Wasn't the whole point to hang out in a big group? Besides, my friends on the team would be there. We always talked and chatted. Was I supposed to separate from them and sit alone so Gabe could find me? Wouldn't that make me look pathetic? Tip number 4, touch him, but not in a creepy way. I snorted. What did that even mean? I read further. Start with a playful slap to his arm or a light touch on his hand. If he doesn't pull away, then you can slide your hand up his arm for a more assertive move. Whoa. Just whoa. This had headbutting accident written all over it. I could just picture myself smacking Gabe's arm too hard and leaving a handprint on his skin. And sliding my hand up his muscles? I think I'd hyperventilate. I bounced my leg nervously, hoping Gabe didn't see it from where he sat. It was funny that I'd been so worried about asking Gabe to help me with batting, and he'd agreed way more easily than I'd thought he would. I didn't even have time to enjoy the relief of not having to get on my knees and grovel, and I was dropped into a pool of anxiety over this stupid party. My 12 hours of stress over that one had been for naught. I clicked out of that article and moved on to the next, desperate to learn a skill that I should have figured out by sophomore year. I was in so much trouble. Chapter 9. The gym basement cleared out quickly after workouts. The school left the doors open until 7 for the community to utilize. Several hardcore runners showed up and started stretching. We had membership gyms in town, but I guess these guys, and 2 ladies, had gone to Sweetwater High and were nostalgic about running under exposed pipes. They showed up every evening and often wore their class of __ shirts, which were faded and full of holes. I set up a tee, trying to keep my head down and not draw attention to the fact that I was staying after. There weren't any rules about a student putting in extra time, just the coaches. I didn't want my teammates to think I was worried about tryouts. No matter how crazy things were in our heads, we always put on a confident face. Coach Mackenzie stopped by the netting and gave me a nod. I waved and then put my head back down, feeling guilty for some reason. Maybe it was because I gave her the impression that I was improving on my own when Gabe deserved the credit. He was the one who told me I was reaching my swing. I hadn't even thought about my form. I'd just come to workouts doing what I always did. Except it didn't work. How my swing got messed up was beyond me. I was just grateful he was willing to help me fix it. Gabe jogged over a few minutes later, wearing basketball pants and a 3/4 tee that hugged his torso. His hair was slightly damp under his ball hat, like he'd been working hard too. The baseball team had been in the weight room today. I let out a sigh at the sight of his nicely shaped body, and then promptly scolded myself. His face lit up and he clambered under the nets. Hi. Hey. I played with the tape on my bat, running my fingernail along the seam. Thanks for coming. Don't thank me until you're on the team. He picked up the tee I'd just set up and put it aside. Are you warmed up? We just finished workouts, so, yeah. I added a little sarcasm to my comment. He gave me a half grin as he dug into my gear bag and came up with a couple balls. Someone's feeling salty this afternoon. My cheeks warmed. I'm just excited and ready to hit something. Good to know. I'll stay out of your way. He winked. He winked. The heat in my cheeks spread to my ears, and my pulse thundered. I wouldn't mind you in my way. My inner self fanned her face as she watched Gabe toss the ball up, bounce it off his bicep, and catch it again. The more time I spent with Gabe, the more I liked him. He wasn't the stuck-up rich kid I'd thought he was before we actually met. I felt silly for having judged him by the size of his wallet or the shininess of his car. That's probably a good idea, I mumbled. If he was in my way, I might just run right into him, wrap my arms around his body, and snuggle in for a spell. His eyebrows pulled together. Way to be a weirdo. I mentally smacked my forehead. Gabe cleared his throat and launched into a lecture about a pitcher's mechanics. He ended with, "That's baseball. Softball may be a little different. It translates. We have our own wind-ups and release points. I'm following you." He stepped closer, taking my bat. Sometimes we're so used to seeing a pitch come that our head goes on autopilot, even though we feel like we're dialed in. So what we need to do is pitch from a different direction. He jogged over and snagged a bucket of balls that had been put away against the wall. Get into the box. He pointed to the lines painted on the floor. They were chipped and faded and had shoe prints on them. The batter's box wrapped around home plate and the base lines ran out, disappearing after 5 feet. I stepped up to the plate. Gabe went down the third base line and soft-tossed a ball across my body. Cocking his head, he took 2 steps to the right and threw again. Okay, so this ball is going to go over the back corner of the plate. Let's just hit one and see where you're making contact. He tossed me a ball, and I swung, keeping my hands in close to my body. The bat made contact, and my hands tingled. I smiled. That felt good. He grinned back, and a connection happened between us that felt just like my hands, all tingly and stuff. We stared at each other for a breath more before he shook himself and reached for another ball. You hit that one over the middle of the plate. See if you can wait until it gets to the back corner. I nodded. I missed the first 2 because I was waiting too long. The third one was perfect and the ting rang out, bouncing off the concrete walls. That's great. We did a few more, and each time he'd tell me to hit at a different point. I wasn't getting all of them, but finding the sweet spot was easier each time. I feel like I'm seeing the ball for the first time in years. Gabe's cheeks lifted and the corners of his eyes crinkled. Like I said, you were anticipating where the ball was going to be based on your past experience instead of watching it. Huh. Who knew my experience was a detriment? He ran his thumb over the laces of another ball. I didn't say that. You're amazing on the field. I wish you played on our team. We could use a catcher as good as you. I warmed at the praise, though I suspected he was pranking me considering Roan was being recruited by Tennessee. My phone, which was sitting on top of my bag by the door, rang. I'll grab it. Gabe jogged over and picked it up, but the call cut off. He glanced down at the screen and then brought it up to his nose. What's this? I shrugged, holding out my hand. Let me see. He pulled the phone back, out of my reach, reading from the screen. Flirting failures and how to avoid them. I jumped for the phone, my body bouncing off Gabe's firm one. I shouldn't have been registering how warm he was or that even though he'd just worked out, he still smelled good. But I did. Stupid Gabedar was in hypersensitive mode. Give me that. He laughed. Is this serious? What is this for? I dropped my head back and groaned. I'm going to hide under the wrestling mats. He laughed at my drama. Tip number 1, guys like to be complimented. Don't go too deep, telling them you like their shirt or that they played well at the last game is perfect. He looked from the screen to me and me to the screen. I'm going to die. I buried my face in my hands. He wrapped his large, strong hands around my wrists, his calluses rubbing my skin, and gently tugged until I let my hands drop. Stooping down to catch my eye, he asked, Are you nervous about the party? I nodded. My humiliation is now complete. I jerked away from his hold, even though part of me liked being held by him. He made being mortally wounded by embarrassment feel a little better. I headed for my bag. I was so done here. Wait. He jogged around me, blocking my escape. I don't get why you would need help flirting, guys are totally into you. Right. I'm so good at it, I have to beat them off with a baseball bat. I flipped my bat around my hand and dropped my gaze once more. I can talk softball and baseball with guys all day long, but when it comes to dating games, I go blank. His cheek lifted. Do you want to practice? I don't think there's any point to it. The one guy I want to flirt with is already taken. I panicked like a runner caught between second and third base and nowhere to go. I'd said way too much. If I didn't shut up, I'd spill all my tumbly-rumbly thoughts about Gabe. He wasn't the guy I thought he was, and the more time I spent with him, the more I wanted to know. Like, was he the kid that ate peanut butter and grape jelly, or peanut butter and hazelnut spread? And what was his stance on ice cream, mint cookie, or cookies and cream? Did he like playing ball in the heat, the rain, or on cool fall days when the leaves blew across the infield? Who, he demanded, bringing my attention back to the fact that he was still holding my phone. Oh no. That is classified information. I moved to go around him and put my bat away. He snagged my elbow, bringing me to a stop right next to him. His hand was firm but gentle, the heat from his touch charging up my arm and flooding my body. My breath came up short. He came closer, his eyes dropping to my lips and back up to meet my gaze. Summer, he said softly. You don't need to use tricks to get a guy's attention. All you have to do is walk into the room. You light it up. I leaned into him. Thanks. He needed to kiss me. Like, right now. Or my knees would never be able to hold me up again. The moments stretched out and the connection between us hummed with new energy. It became a force, a wave you could duck under or take for a sweet ride. I was so ready to ride that wave. I leaned in slowly, waiting for him to tug me closer. Gabe leaned back, and my need for his kiss tripped into the void between us. So who is this guy? Do I know him? He wouldn't look at me. Instead, he focused on his shoes. I was so drunk on the pheromones circling my head that I nearly told him it was him. At the last second, I cut off my answer by gluing my lips together. Maybe, I finally said. He lifted an eyebrow. Will he be at the party? A smile crept across my lips, unbidden. Yeah, he was going to be there. I think so. He grinned too. Good. Then I'll get to see who it is. I'm not worried, I lied. Gabe knew every guy on the baseball team. He probably already had a mental shortlist of possibilities. You'll never guess who it is. I put my bat away and picked up my bag. Gabe took it off my shoulder. Let me get that for you. I blushed. Yeah, a full-on cheek-to-chest blush. I couldn't remember a time when a guy had carried my bag for me, or my books, or heavy things at the store, for that matter. What happened to chivalry, anyway? Oh yeah, it was all wrapped up in Gabe. Thanks. Do you want to grab a shake? I did want to. I really wanted to. But getting a shake felt a lot like a date. I looked around to see if Stacy was anywhere in sight. Gabe bumped me with his elbow. You looking for your secret crush? I promise to leave if he shows up. I laughed. No. I cut off before I mentioned his girlfriend. Yeah, I was a total loser, but being with Gabe felt so right. We were having fun together, and I didn't want him to shut off like he did when she texted. Regret rushed through me. Gabe had a girlfriend. I didn't need to be taking up any more of his time than I already had. Well, this is my piece of junk car. I patted the trunk. Thanks for your help. Thank you. That was really fun. He leaned against my car. It shifted under his weight. The poor girl. I didn't bring a lot of guys around. If my Chevy had knees, they'd be melting too. I shrugged, turning so I could copy his posture. It's always fun to play ball. It is? For you, it's always fun. He leaned closer, his eyes boring into mine. Isn't it for you? I countered. I couldn't imagine anyone playing at the level Gabe played at and not having a good time. He yanked his hat off and ran his hand through his hair. It's lots of expectations. Pressure. My parents lay it on pretty thick. I remembered back to the night his dad had yelled at him in front of me. Maybe he was thinking about it too, because he'd gone quiet. All my pressure comes from myself. My mom jokes that softball will give me ulcers. Our eyes reconnected. She says I take grades and cleaning my room and pretty much everything too seriously. He chuckled, leaning his shoulder against mine. My body responded by buzzing pleasantly, and I had to work not to sigh like a fangirl. I picked up on that type A vibe you have going on. I ducked my head. No one's going to make things happen for me. He bumped me. Unlike me, who had the world handed to him. I cringed deeply. I didn't have any right to call him stuck-up or snobby or any of the other things I'd said. He hadn't been anything but nice to me, helping when he had nothing to gain from it. I'm sorry about that. He waved me off. I'm just pranking you. I bumped him back, harder. Watch it. I don't take pranks lightly. He threw his hand over his chest. Summer. Are you flirting with me? My eyes bugged and I smacked him. No. Realizing I had just done numbers 2 and 4 on the list, I laughed at myself. Gabe's phone rang before he could come up with a comeback. He glanced at the screen. His jaw clenched, and he handed me back my phone so he could answer his. I kind of liked that he'd hung on to it, like he didn't want to let me get away too easily. I have to take this. Yeah. Sure. I took my bag and opened the trunk to throw it inside. I had to pick up my sisters in 10 minutes, but Gabe was standing behind my car and not moving as he listened to whoever was talking on the line. His eyebrows drew down. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Don't leave. He hung up his phone. Is everything okay? I asked. No, he sighed. I have to go. His eyes were hooded, shut off from me. I glanced at the phone in his hand but couldn't see a name or picture because the screen was dark. It was all for the best. I didn't need to encourage feelings for a guy who was already taken. Spending more time with him would only cause me heartache. I have to pick up my sisters. I walked around the front of the car to avoid touching him and feeling any of those buzzings that made my knees go weak. I'll see you tomorrow. I dropped behind the wheel and fired up the car. Something flashed in my rear view, and I saw Gabe running across the lot to his truck. Bye, I whispered to his retreating figure. He was not mine for the taking. Not that I should consider dating him. Softball, college, then boys, I repeated over and over again. If there was a guy I would consider breaking the rules for, it would be him. Chapter 10. Where do you guys want to eat? I asked my sisters as they flopped into the car. I'd watched the last 20 minutes of their doubleheader wrapped in a wool blanket. Accelerated teams had a different season schedule than the high school teams. They played in the fall and started earlier than us in the spring. The temperatures were getting warmer, but the lights had turned on and the thermometer dropped by the time the ump called out, "That's the ball game." I chatted up a couple of the parents and learned that they'd lost the first game. They won the second by 3, which called for a celebration. "The burger bar," said Grace from the back seat. Kaylee agreed. "I need a shake. I'm famished." Part of me wanted to argue that she should eat real food before going right to the ice cream. But I couldn't decide if a greasy cheeseburger and fries was really all that much better than an over-the-top shake, so I kept my mouth shut. Mom worked double shifts at the hospital on the weekends. She was gunning for a position in management and felt like she needed to put in the extra hours to prove she was dedicated. Basically, she had to show them that even though she was a single mother, her children wouldn't get in the way of her job. The envelope of cash on the counter every Friday morning for dinner out that night was her way of buying us off. Whatever. I got to spend some quality time with my sisters, and none of us had to cook dinner. What did it matter if we had a parent around or not? "Tell me about your history test," I prompted Kaylee. She was busy untying her cleats. We didn't like to wear them off the field and always changed. Mine were on the floor in the back seat. It was fine. I had a hard time with the dates. Numbers suck. My own averageness at math could attest to that fact. "I hear ya." We bumped fists. Grace asked a question about their social studies assignment. I pulled into the burger bar and looked for a place in the back to park. A shiny Jaguar caught my eye, and I did a double take. Yep. The vanity plate said Bowman. It was Gabe's dad's car for sure. I scanned the area. Maybe they were out for a family dinner too. I glanced at my blabbermouth little sisters, grateful I hadn't told them a thing about my free time in the cages. We got out and made our way to the front of the building. The burger barn was the kind of old-fashioned hamburger joint where you stood at a window and placed your order, then loitered around until they called your number. Once upon the 70s, they had girls roller skate to your car to take your order, but that had gone away with bell-bottoms and polyester. We all stepped up to the window. Kaylee ordered a chocolate brownie sundae for dinner. At least she was eating a banana. Grace opted for a burger and fries. I went for the fish and chips. As I turned away, I caught sight of a group hanging out under the tree at the end of the parking lot. There were a couple of motorcycles parked nearby. I recognized TJ. Harper used to date him, until she figured out that he was a loser who was going to dedicate the next 12 years of his life to starting a band. Tasha Martell sat on his lap, running her fingers through her hair and staring at him like he was a rock and roll legend. EW. Tires squealed, and every head in the parking lot swiveled to see who was being obnoxious. My heart picked up speed. I knew that red truck. Gabe hopped out, his eyes hard, his focus on the group of people under the tree. He swaggered over, but there was tightness to his shoulders. One that said he was expecting a fight. He searched the group, said hello to a couple of the guys, and then disappeared behind the tree with one of the guys from the band. Tasha continued to suck face with TJ. Geez, get a back seat, people. Hello. Kaylee waved her hand in front of my face. Aren't we 402? I blinked, staring at the slip in my hand but not seeing it. Here. I pushed it at her and walked toward the tree, an unseen force pulling me after Gabe. I went wide, avoiding the crew at the front, who were busy joking and shoving one another as they ate standing up. Bro, let's ditch these guys and hit the cages. Gabe's voice was deep and insistent, pleading, almost. We're going to jam, came the reply. The voice was eerily similar to Gabe's. I dared a glance around the giant tree trunk and then ducked back again, my hand over my racing heart. Eli, Gabe's older brother, was wearing a black long-sleeved shirt. His hair was 6 months overdue for a trim, and he had a splotchy beard going on that screamed homeless man. His eyes were red-rimmed and haunted. I need you, man. I'm still struggling with my swing. Coach says my timing is off, but I can't get a handle on it. What the heck? I scowled. Was he pranking me? Did he know I was here? I waited to see if they'd burst out laughing. If they did, I'd sprint back to Kaylee and Grace and we'd blow this burger joint. And then I'd never speak to Gabe again, and I'd be off the hook from going to that stupid party tomorrow night. Your timing is fine, replied Eli. Come watch me swing. Please. I put my hand on the trunk. Gabe sounded desperate. But why? He pressed on. Recruiters are coming to our first game. I have to be on it or I could lose my chance. Liar. Recruiters wouldn't show up until the middle of the season. I thought hard, trying to figure out Gabe's motives. His swing was great, hadn't he just fixed mine? He didn't need Eli's help, and yet he was practically offering to clean his room in exchange for batting tips. I can't tonight, bro. We'll go first thing tomorrow. Dad won't like it if you drive his car home tonight. Gabe's voice changed from begging to warning. Not after drinking with the guys. Who's gonna tell him I'm drinking? Eli's tone went dark and foreboding. I'm not going to say anything, and neither are you. Are you? There was a gulp and an intake of breath that sent icy fear flying through the air. I rounded the tree, propelled by a need to help Gabe. I stumbled upon Eli holding Gabe by the arm, their faces only inches apart. Gabe's eyes darted to me and then back again in shock. Eli dropped him. Straightening his shirt, he turned his back on his brother and made his way around the tree and out of sight. Gabe rolled his shoulders out. I swallowed. He's not going to drink and drive, is he? I had little sisters. They'd be out with friends tonight. Gabe pressed his lips together and shook his head. He'll sleep it off at TJ's and drive home in the morning. Then why? I circled my hand around. Gabe sighed wearily. He put his hands on his hips and stared up at the spring starts on the tree. I rubbed my arms, wishing I'd brought a hoodie. One motorcycle started up, followed by others and a couple of cars, as the group made of leather and feather for brains left. The sound was deafening. I covered my ears and yelled, "You'd think musicians would protect their hearing better." Gabe smiled without showing his teeth. The noise faded off. They aren't musicians. They say they are so that they can drink and party and think it's cool. He dropped his arms. I hate that Eli hangs with them. Why? I mean, I can make a few educated guesses, but I'd rather hear what you have to say. I batted my eyelashes. Well, try to bat my eyelashes. It felt more like I was trying to get a piece of dirt out of my eye. That got a chuckle out of Gabe. At least my horrid flirting skills were good for something. He moved around the tree and took a seat on the concrete bench. I followed. Kaylee and Grace were at a table, working their way through Kaylee's sundae by dipping my fries in it and mowing down. Gabe patted the seat next to him. Do you want to sit? I glanced at the girls again. I would, but if they see me sitting with you, I'll never hear the end of it. Why? Because I'm the rich kid? I shook my head. No. Because you're a hot guy my age, and the kind of distraction I'm always preaching to them to stay away from. One side of his mouth lifted in a self-satisfied smile. You think I'm hot? Oh, please. I threw up my hands. You think you're hot? He scowled. No, I don't. I rolled my eyes, clearly expressing my disbelief of that statement, and plopped on the other end of the bench. I could believe Gabe was a decent human being, but I wasn't buying his humility too. So, do I need to call the cops on a rager tonight? He shook his head. It's not like that. They'll drink. Most of them will be fine. Eli's different. Different how? I prompted. He looked away, as if he needed a moment to gather his thoughts on the matter before deciding to trust me. He's an alcoholic. Has been since sophomore year. My lips formed an O. I ran my hand through my hair and then sagged. I'm sorry. I had no idea what to say. If there were words in the English language that could help, I couldn't find them. Gabe clasped his hands together in front of him. My parents are in denial. They sent him through a rehab program the summer before his junior year. When he came home, they acted like he was cured and swept the whole thing under the rug. He played ball. Did great. Earned awards. And then after graduation, he fell in with TJ and his band. He trailed off as if the rest of the story was a given. My heart ached for him. I loved my sisters dearly. And yes, I was pretty much raising them, but I couldn't imagine fighting something like alcoholism on my own. Even I would call in the parents on that one. Mom would step up to save one of my sisters. I hoped. But what if she didn't? Then what would I do? Most nights, I can get him to spend time with me, working on my game. Those are the good nights. Tasha texts Stacy to let me know where they are so I can meet up with him. I have to hit the timing just right, because if he's already started drinking, there's no way he's stopping. I sat up. So much of that statement was huge. Stacy's involvement, no wonder he dated her. He needed her much more than he needed someone like me. A light turned on in my head. That's why you made me scrub nasty bathroom floors, so you could leave early enough to catch Eli? He nodded. When I got home tonight, he was gone. I thought I'd gotten lucky finding him before they disappeared in TJ's basement. He lifted both his empty hands. Some luck, huh? Gabe, I scooted closer. Summer. Grace practically shrieked. I turned to see her and Kaylee sauntering over, their faces smug. Summer, are you talking to a guy? Kaylee emphasized the last word like a lawyer in court delivering the crushing blow of evidence. I took a long blink to collect myself. Clearly, introductions are in order. I stood and motioned to everyone while reciting their names. My sisters giggled like 8th graders when a hot senior was around. Sisters. Gabe won them over with his killer smile and inquiries about their games, the positions they played, and their batting stats. Their matching uniforms made it easy to come up with conversation topics. Well, easy if you knew anything about the sport. And Gabe knew a whole lot about softball, which only made my sisters go all gooey-eyed over him. Okay, they might have been ogling him as well. There was just something about hearing the terms ERA and on-base percentage falling from a set of perfect lips that made my hormones want to slide into the conversation. Gabe glanced at me, mischief in his eyes. So, do you two know who Summer's secret crush is? She won't tell me. Ah. Grace grabbed my arm and bounced. You have a secret crush? Kaylee played it a little cooler. She dusted her fingers on her shoulder. I can find out, but it'll cost you. Gabe reared back at her obvious attempt at flirting but recovered quickly. Rubbing his hands together in anticipation, he asked, What's it going to cost me? Nothing. I intoned over the top of them. There's nothing more to see here. Move along, girls. I began herding them back to the car. Friday was catch-up night for all the chores, homework, and television shows we'd missed out on during the week. The Hallmark Channel was calling our name, and a certain vampire had broken up with his girlfriend the week before. "I'll see you tomorrow?" Gabe called over their heads. I waved in response, not trusting myself to come up with a decent answer that my sisters wouldn't pick apart for the next 3 hours. I certainly couldn't flirt with him while they were around. I'd lose all credibility as an older, wiser sibling. Once we were in the car, the girls let loose. "I can't believe you've been hiding a crush from us. He's so cute. Can he come over?" "What?" I flipped around to stare at the two of them who had ended up together in the back seat, making me chauffeur. It only proved how much Gabe distracted me. "I'm not inviting Gabe to our house." "Why not?" "He'd look so good on our couch," Grace said dreamily. "Yeah, he would. But that was all the more reason to keep him far, far away. Girls, our couch would gross him out. It was tan, with chocolate milk stains and several Sharpie marks on the arm. They both slumped. "But," said Kaylee, brightening, "if he doesn't like you because of your couch, then he's not the guy for you." I laughed. How many times had I said things like that to them? Grace lifted her shoulders. "Can you throw him out? Would he pout? Would he stomp and shout?" I laughed harder. "Stop rhyming. I mean it. Anybody want a peanut?" Grace swiped moisture from under her eyes. That was it, we were in serious need of some Dread Pirate Roberts romance tonight. "Seriously, though, are you dating him?" Kaylee pressed. Her blue eyes narrowed and her shoulders slumped in defeat. After all the lectures I'd given her about focusing on ball and not boys, I needed to watch my step. "I'm not dating him." The words were 100% honest, and yet I didn't like them. "I think he has a girlfriend." Grace shook her head, whipping her hair from side to side. "He was totally checking you out." My ears started to burn. "He was not." "Was he?" Oh my gosh, I was becoming one of those desperate females who fell at a guy's feet. I cut off Grace's response. "It doesn't matter if he was, I'm not dating until college." Grace leaned back in her seat and mumbled. Kaylee rolled her eyes. "You're nuts." "Probably," I teased, giving her arm a shove. We made it home and went the rounds about who got to shower first, deep cleaned the front room and the kitchen, did homework, and then landed in a pile on the couch to watch a movie. My sisters were out in the first 15 minutes. My mind wouldn't settle. I kept wondering if Gabe really was checking me out. I'd caught him looking at me in English class too. Did that mean he was into me? He was not into me. There was no way. But then, how many people had he told about his brother? That information was private, personal, and huge. The kind of thing you confide in a friend. That was all. I'd told him I was failing at ball, so he must have felt comfortable sharing his worries too. That was all there was to this whole crazy turn of events. Gabe wasn't into me. He just needed a friend. I could do that. I could be his friend. Feeling like I'd righted the world once again, I nudged my sisters off to their rooms. We all needed beauty sleep. Especially me. I had a party to go to the next night. Funny, I wasn't as nervous as I had been. Yep. The friend zone was a comfortable and easy place to be. Not at all as scary as flirting partner or potential girlfriend. Yep. Friends. But friends don't kiss. I ignored the sense of disappointment that threatened to sour my mood. Friends don't kiss, so what? I'd lived without Gabe's kisses for 17 years, I could get through a few more months until graduation. I'd like to say I had my tiny crush under control, but I spent way too long thinking over what type of lip gloss would make my mouth look kissable. Chapter 11. What are you doing? I backed out of the closet on my hands and knees, where I was busy digging out the Amazon packages full of clothes I'd never bothered to look at. They were Mom's way of making herself feel better for never being home and missing my games. I hadn't opened any of them because I didn't want to assuage her guilt. I'd rather have a mom in the stands than a new shirt any day. But when the going got tough, I crumbled and went looking for something to wear to the party. I shoved my hair out of my face as I glanced up at Bailey. I'm selling my soul for a cute outfit. Sweet. She didn't miss a beat. Didn't question my odd comment. Let me help. Was it any wonder she was one of my bestest friends? She sat cross-legged on the worn gray carpet and reached for a box. Giving it a shake, she said, I'm guessing, maxi dress. She tore into it. Sure enough, it was a red maxi dress with a twist over the bodice and a knot in the bottom of the skirt. I cocked my head. Cute. You should wear this to school sometime. I lowered my brow. I wasn't really a dress-to-school type. I always made my hair look great and wore makeup. It wasn't like I was a total tomboy or anything. But I could stand to be more girly. Wearing a dress now and then won't kill me. She threw it at me. A few people might die of shock, though. I laughed. True that. Rubbing my palms together, I selected the largest package. Inside was a pair of skinny jeans and a flowing bone top with rickrack around the neckline. In a smaller bag was a pair of earrings and a necklace that matched perfectly. I grinned at Bailey. I think I just found my outfit for the party. Try it on. Try it on. Try it on. I giggled as I slipped into the perfect pair of jeans. Even I knew they were hugging the right places. The top slid over my head and landed perfectly just above my hips. Wow. Just wow. Bailey covered her mouth. I spun around and found my image in the mirror on the back of the door. I looked good. Like date night come and kiss me good. Was I a horrible person because I wanted Gabe to see me in this outfit, wanted him to drool a puddle on the floor when I walked into the party? I mean, last night, I was all set to be friends and everything, and then one great piece of clothing and matching earrings and I was ready to charge right through those barriers. Bailey got to her feet and came to stand behind me. She lifted my hair off my neck and piled it on top of my head. You look so different. She let go and pulled back a couple sections, leaving the rest down. We need to do something out of the ordinary. Agreed. No braids and no ponytails. I pursed my lips as I contemplated my options. Messy bun? I'd never been able to pull those off. Oh, I could get a bun in place. But the artfully messy part always looked just plain messy. Do you have a scarf? I snorted. Did you really just ask me that? Bailey laughed. Okay, so no scarf. Maybe there's one in all those packages? I want to wrap it around your head. I think you should leave your hair down. Guys love long hair, like, casts a spell on them or something. Right, I mumbled as I went back to unwrapping items. Because I've been casting spells on guys with this for a while now. I lifted a lock of hair. I hadn't done anything with it when I'd gotten out of the shower the night before. I had spritzed it with leave-in conditioner so it smelled nice even if it looked stringy. Bailey nodded. It's true. You've just been too busy with ball to notice the way they look at you. Stop it. You have to say that because you're my best friend. She stopped opening an envelope and looked at me. I have to say it because it's true. I've had at least 3 guys ask me about your no dating rule this year. Shut up. I smacked at her leg. Who? She twisted her fingers over her lips, locking them shut on the subject. Boo it, if you were to rescind your rule about dating, I could drop a few phone calls. I shook my head. No way. I have tryouts in a few days. I can't start playing the field. Pun intended? You know it. We fist bumped. Sometimes we were the biggest dorks. We finished pulling out the clothes. Bailey hung things up and organized my closet while I evaluated each piece. As much as I hate to admit it, I actually like this stuff. Why don't you want to admit it? Asked Bailey as she expertly folded a gray shirt with ruffled arms. There were 5 different types of navy ribbon sewn around each sleeve that had me in happy fits. Because I feel like my mom's buying me off. There was a small gasp from the doorway, and I whipped around to find Mom standing there, holding a mug in each hand. "Summer," she half scolded, half pleaded. "Mom," I was at a loss for words. Oh my gosh, the wrinkles of pain in her forehead were horrible, and I'd put them there. I didn't mean. Mom brightened in a totally fake, totally I can get through this way that she'd done several times with my dad when they were first divorced. Ouch. "I made you girls some cocoa. Here, Bailey." She held out one mug. Her pink scrub top crinkled in the too quiet space. "Thank you, Mrs. Snow." Bailey took the cup, trying to be chipper to overcome the huge mountain of awkwardness in the middle of the room. "It smells so good. It's my mother's special recipe. I wanted to check in with you girls." Her eyes cut away. "Since I haven't seen you much lately. I missed you." "Me too," I responded too quickly. My throat grew too tight to speak. Shoot. It was so easy to be judgy and snarky when my mom wasn't around. I forgot how long she was on her feet each day, necessitating the thick-soled walking shoes that added support and comfort in what was, no doubt, a long and wearying job. Nursing wasn't for wimps. "You look nice." Mom handed me a cup. I took it carefully, not wanting to spill on the amazing shirt. The fold marks needed to be ironed out. "Thanks. And thanks for the clothes. They're perfect." They were. They were exactly what I would have bought for myself. Each one was my style, which meant my mom knew me better than I thought she did. And that I was a huge jerk for leaving them in the closet so long. I'm already looking forward to wearing them next week. Good. Her smile was ghostly at best. "I'm headed to the grocery store, do you need anything?" Like a quick kick in the pants or being chewed out for saying something totally stupid. Gah. Why did I keep doing this? First with Gabe and then Mom. Although, in all fairness, I hadn't expected Mom to overhear me. Nope. I'm good. I was so not good. Mom still had on that grin and bear it mask. "Okay. I'll be back around 3, and then my shift starts at 6. I sent the girls to the beach with their friends. Did they do their strengthening exercise? Mom pressed her lips. I gave them the day off. Okay. That's not how it worked when I was in 8th grade, but whatever. Tonight's a girls' night at Harper's. I left out the part about the party, not even sure why. Tell her mother I said hello. Mom stepped one foot out the door. I think your sisters are going to a movie with friends. I told them to be home by 11. Will you text me if they're late? Again, that didn't happen when I was younger. Sure. Bye, Mrs. Snow, called Bailey. Mom waved and then was gone. I slumped onto my bed, the springs creaking in protest. You okay? Bailey's eyes were huge. I'm sure being caught in my family drama was so much fun for her. I sniffed. No. I just broke my mom's heart. Emotions plowed through me like a bunt thrown for a quick out at first. I'm sorry. I didn't know she was standing there, or I wouldn't have asked about the clothes. It's not your fault. I have to learn to keep thoughts inside my head. Bailey shifted. Do you really think these are guilt gifts? I scrubbed my forehead. I did. But then I saw the look on her face, and now I think she might have been trying to be nice. I sat up and threw my arm out. I mean, look at all this stuff. It's not like we have a lot of money or anything, and she's spending it on me. Yeah. Bailey sank next to me. I have to apologize. The garage door rumbled shut, shaking the whole house. Mom was gone. I could call, but that felt like the chicken way out. I pulled a spare thread off my shirt and dropped it on the carpet. I get so mad sometimes that she's not here. I just feel like a mom should be around, to answer life questions and sign permission slips. One too many missed field trips had taught me to forge her signature in the 9th grade, and I wrote late excuses for the girls at least once a month. And parent. My anger surged anew but was quickly clipped by guilt for even thinking this way. Who was I to judge? I'd never been married or had to support 3 girls. Bailey patted my arm. You'll talk to her and smooth things over. In the meantime, let's work on that hair. She drummed her fingers together, and I allowed the change of subject. I have an idea. Will I like it? I raised my eyebrows, skeptical. That remains to be seen. She hopped up and plugged in my styling wand. I sank into the spot on the floor where the wand would reach, but I could see what she was doing in the mirror. If it turned out great, then I'd want to reproduce the look. If I had a nest for small woodland animals on my head, then I'd like to know before leaving the house. Oh, I almost forgot. I asked around about Gabe and Stacy. What? I spun, earning myself a yank to the hair in the process. After the way he was looking at you in math, I was curious. I hid behind my hands. Do you want to know what I found out? No, I half moaned, half yelped before dropping my hands. Okay, tell me. It was better to know he was serious with another girl, that he'd given his heart away. It wasn't like I'd taken time to ask him what was going on with her. They didn't walk around school holding hands or anything, so I figured that was a good sign. But then, some people weren't touchy-feely and they were together. So, no answers from stalking him in the hallway. He's single. I sagged with understanding. Not with relief. That would be ridiculous. I wasn't so caught up in Gabe that I was going to let his relationship status determine my moods. The ultra-cautious side of me turned on, blinking yellow lights and all. How do you know? Because I asked. Who? Does it matter? Yeah, it kinda does. Because if my best friend asks a guy if he's single, then it's pretty obvious I'm into him. She leaned forward. Are you into him? Danger. 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 Sort of. Bailey jumped up and down. I cowed, waiting for the hot wand to land on my arm. She managed to keep it in place while she happy danced. This is epic. Shoo, I waved my hands. The house was empty, but I couldn't risk my sisters finding out. They'd tease me to no end, and Kaylee would jump at the chance to justify blowing off a practice to spend time with boys. No one can know. What about Gabe? She sing-songed his name. Only if he admits to liking me first. She smacked my arm. You're such a baby. I'm cautious. And you can't blame me for that. She settled down. All right, let's get to the business of making you irresistible. I may have to call Harper for makeup. Might as well. Call her over. While Bailey dialed and explained the situation, I changed out of the cute clothing and into something I could get makeup on should I drop a brush. I started reviewing the last week of my and Gabe interactions using a he's single lens. It was quite possible that Gabe had flirted with me, shamelessly at one point. I fanned my face just thinking about his arms around me. If I could play it cool tonight, let him make the first move, I might just have my first high school kiss. Chapter 12. A couple hours later, I stood in front of my mirror for final inspections. Harper and Bailey were behind me, their heads cocked as they scrutinized every detail. The blousey shirt and tight pants were perfect. Harper brought over a pair of wedges that increased my height and matched perfectly. The earrings dangled, that was going to take some getting used to, as the tassels tickled my neck. Bailey assured me I wouldn't feel them by the end of the night. I look amazing, said Harper. Beautiful, said Bailey. Grown up, I finished. I'd be 18 in a couple months. This was the first time I felt like it. Harper hooked her elbow through my arm and rested her head on my shoulder. Gabe won't know what hit him. I'm not sure I know what hit me. I leaned closer to the glass, amazed at the way Harper had been able to blend my eye makeup so perfectly. No one is going to recognize me. Bailey giggled. Good. You're not supposed to be softball Summer tonight. You're Summer, the sophisticated woman any guy would be lucky to have. Her eyes widened. But just so we're clear, make sure you talk to Gabe. If a deluge of guys hang around you all night, he might think you're giving him the brush off. Don't worry. Your online articles already informed me of the importance of standing around like a loner to give a guy a chance. My door flew open, startling the three of us. I pressed my hand to my heart. Geez, Kaylee. Her mouth fell open. I grinned, enjoying the look of awe and respect from my younger sister. Did you need something? Grace, she screamed. Grace came running down the hallway. Wha, Summer? Yeah, soak it in, girls. I was feeling all sorts of grown-up sassy tonight. I'm not sure if that boded well for Gabe or not, but it was empowering nonetheless. Did you two need something? We're headed to the movies. I slung a thin-strapped purse over my shoulder. Harper and Bailey worked on cleaning up the makeup and hair products scattered about the room. Who's driving? Adri's mom, Grace answered. Will there be boys going? Grace turned to Kaylee for help. I narrowed my eyes. Kaylee cocked a hip. We're in 8th grade. Do you want us to go to high school without knowing how to handle guys? Handle? Are you meeting guys you have to handle? I meant talk to and hang out with and stuff. It was the and stuff I was worried about. But Kaylee had a point. Hanging out with boys at the movie theater at her age was good for their social skills. And so much better than hanging out in dark basements. Which, of course, made me wonder if there would be a dark basement situation with Gabe tonight, maybe some spin the bottle or 7 minutes in heaven. No way could I manage that. I'd run screaming before I headbutt another boy into a bloody nose. Okay. Go. Have fun. Be home by 11 and text me a picture of you in this house. But you won't be home until 12, whined Grace. When I was your age, curfew was 10:30. I shooed them out of my room. You're welcome. They knew when to back off and were out the door quickly. I turned around to get a face full of coconut body spray. Gah. I swatted at the air and held my breath. Sorry. I was aiming for your hair, said Bailey. She went behind me and gave another spritz. Okay, you're officially ready. Harper put her hands on my back and pushed me towards the door. Remember, get in, make a splash with this new look, and find Gabe. If you don't make it to my house for movie night, we totally understand. But, we get deets. All of them, added Bailey. Right. Harper nodded. With one last round of good luck hugs, I was on my way to the party. My mouth was dry, and I dug through my purse for a piece of gum. Tonight could go either way. I could leave deliriously happy or I could brand myself a total loser. I glanced at my phone, wondering if I had time at the stoplight to speed read another article. I could do this. I took deep, even breaths. If I was going to go down, then I was going down swinging. Chapter 13. James's house was quieter than I'd expected. Honestly, I wasn't sure what I'd expected. I mean, it wasn't like James had a reputation for throwing rakers. I guess I'd thought it would be like the movies where you can hear the bass pumping from half a block down and the neighbor across the street is on the front lawn in his bathrobe, glaring at the teenagers who stream in and out. Yeah, it wasn't like that at all. I texted Maisie before getting out of the car to see if she was here yet. She replied that she was already inside and to come find her in the kitchen. I knocked on the door and was let in by Sean Nelson. He had on a Mariners jersey and hat and a pair of basketball shorts. I guess that's a guy's version of dressing up for a party. He stared at me for a minute before motioning for me to come in. He left the door hanging open and called out, "Hey, guys, Summer's here." I tried to smile as several senior guys, playing Xbox in the front room, glanced up and then did double takes. Carter Peterson tripped on his way in the room, spilling carrots and cookies off his paper plate. I dropped down on one knee and caught a handful. Another handful bounced off various parts of me before landing in the carpet. "Ha!" boomed Carter. "I wasn't sure that was you, but nobody has reflexes like that." He elbowed Roan Martin, the catcher on the baseball team. "She beat you to that one." "I wasn't even trying." Roan laughed good-naturedly at the teasing. I swallowed against the dryness. Sean was still looking at me. Looking at me. I awkwardly dropped the carrots back on Carter's plate, landing most of them in the ranch dressing. At least I hadn't gotten that all over my hands. I brushed my palms down my pants. The game was paused and the guys were all waiting for me to say something. None of the articles I'd read told me what to do if faced with 5 hot baseball players at once. "Anyone know the way to the kitchen?" "I'm in rare form tonight." "Down the hall and to the right," said Carter as he pointed. "Thanks." I flipped my hair over my shoulder as I left. Bailey had said the coconut spray in my hair would leave behind a soft scent if I moved my hair before I left the room. I was seriously proud of myself for remembering. When I was halfway down the hall, the video game noise came back on and the kitchen noise started up. People were laughing and yelling over one another. I turned the corner into a great room and reached out, snagging a squishy T-ball out of the air before it smacked me in the face. "Oh," everyone chorused together. "It's summer." "That's not summer. Summer doesn't wear cute clothes." I glared at Violet and then brushed her comment off like a piece of lint. "Ha! Of course she'd catch it." I held up the ball and lifted my eyebrows. "What did I miss?" James sauntered forward. He was an excellent host, putting his hand on my lower back and ushering me into the circle. "Wacky ball." Okay, I still wasn't sure what that meant, but by the way the juniors in the corner were whispering behind their hands, I was in for a quick education. "We start the ball around the circle, we have to keep it off the ground. Whoever drops it or catches it goes in the middle." He grabbed my shoulders and spun me around slowly. "You start the ball this time, and whoever drops or catches it will head into the closet with you for 7 minutes of heaven." My heart rate spiked hard. Like my heart literally jumped against my rib cage. This was some baseball version of Spin the Bottle mixed with What the Heck Am I Doing? Craziness. My history with this game was not pretty, and I had no intention of having my first kiss with some hotshot ballplayer out to prove a point to his buddies. No. No way. No how. I threw my hands up in the air. I didn't know what I was walking into. "Come on. You can't back out now." James massaged my shoulders. His hands were clammy. I could feel the moisture through my thin shirt and shuddered at the thought of kissing him. "She's just afraid she'll end up in there with you, handsy," said Gabe. I whipped my head around to find the source of that deep and sexy voice. Gabe was in the corner of the kitchen with Davis Bennett, working their way through some chips and dip. How my Gabedar had missed him, I didn't know. Okay, I did. I walked into a flying projectile and was forced into a kissing game. James lifted his hands an inch off my body and backed away. "Bring it, Washington. Let's see you win 7 minutes with the new and improved summer." Gabe met my gaze, which I was certain resembled that of a deer in the headlights. This was the exact opposite situation that the articles recommended I create. I was not alone, I was the center of attention. I wasn't poised and positioned in the best light to show off my muscular thighs, because catchers have great legs, don't you know? And I certainly wasn't giving him flirty glances and come-hither stares. No, I was shaking like a leaf, scared out of my mind that I would end up in the closet with one of these guys. "I'll play." Gabe shoved his way between the right and left fielders. James pulled back and zinged the ball at him. My hands flew to my mouth. The ball moved so fast. Gabe caught it one-handed, his eyes steely as he made sure James was watching. Then, he opened his hand and let the ball fall to the tile. It bounced several times, the squishy noise echoing in the silence that descended. Oops. Gabe lifted a shoulder. That's not fair, cried Violet. You have to at least try. No. No. James wagged a finger at her. Fair's fair. Gabe and Summer, we'll see you in 7 minutes. He motioned to the mudroom off the kitchen. Davis set the timer over the stove. My feet dragged along the tile, the wedges making a bump 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 sound. Did I want to kiss Gabe? Heck yes. Did I want him to kiss me because he had to? Heck no. This had disaster written all over it. Gabe motioned for me to enter first. Don't worry, he whispered as I passed. A yummy shiver raced over my skin as his breath warmed my ear. He shut the door behind us, leaving the light off. There was a small window over the bank of coat hooks that provided enough light to see his outline. Shoo, he held up a hand. Let's wait a second until the game starts up again. Wait for what? I concentrated on making my breathing sound normal. In the small space, and with the way my heart was racing, I couldn't seem to draw a full breath. What oxygen I was getting into my system was accompanied by Gabe's delicious man scent. A muffled squeal came through the door, followed by laughter and more yells. Do you guys play this game every year? I asked quietly. I don't. So that meant he'd played to save me, and now he was stuck in the rumor mill right along with me. Sorry to get you caught up in this. I'm not. Something brushed my arm. I screamed and swatted at it, dancing away. Gabe laughed. Relax. I was trying to find out where you were in the dark. It's hard to see in here. I was so smooth. I giggled. Can you hold on a minute? What? His body went completely motionless. Why? Because I want to look up an article about how to do this right. He chuckled. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could feel him smile. It warmed me from my head to my toes. I don't think they write articles about being locked in mudrooms. Well, they should. I folded my arms. Then, remembering that guys saw that as being closed off, I dropped them to my side. Be open and friendly. Touch his arm if you're standing or bump his shoulder. Nothing was helpful when I couldn't actually see him. What would you name it? Mudroom kissing for dummies. Hey! I pushed him a little too hard, and he stumbled into the dryer. I'm not a dummy, I'm inexperienced. He righted himself and rubbed the back of his neck. How inexperienced? Crap. He picked up on that? I was hoping he'd press the dummy thing a little more. Summer? He said my name softly. I chewed my lip. I haven't exactly kissed a guy in a while. How long? Does 4th grade count? He moved closer. His body was warm, like an electric blanket I could snuggle up against. No. It doesn't. Are you sure? I'm thinking that it at least has to count for half a point. Maybe not quite a half. I pretty much had to chase him down, kissing tag. I'm not in the habit of chasing guys and making them kiss me. I mean, you don't have to kiss me. We could just, stand here or something. He chuckled. I'm going to hug you. Please don't hit me. My whole face burned. Thank goodness it was 3 shades past dark in there. Okay. I gulped. His arms came around me and my face was smushed into his shoulder. I turned my head, tucking into the spot between his chin and his collarbone. I fit just right and relaxed into his solid body. You have a nice body, I sighed. His chest bounced beneath my hand as he silently laughed. Thank you. I mean, it makes me feel safe. He kissed my forehead. That's an even bigger compliment. Well, don't let it go to your head. I won't. His hand came up and his thumb brushed over my cheek. I gasped. It felt so good. He was tender with me, moving slow and pulling me closer. I went willingly. I don't lean on people, like ever. I'm a lucky guy. His thumb brushed over my lips. I tipped my head back and could feel his breath on my lips. A rather loud burst of laughter came from the other side of the door, reminding me of where we were and why. "Don't kiss me," I whispered. He cupped my cheek. "Why not?" I leaned into his palm. "Because I'll always wonder if you kissed me because of the game or if you kissed me because you wanted to." "I want to," he said simply. My mind tripped over the words. Gabe Washington wanted to kiss me. I didn't think about what I was doing as I lifted up onto my tiptoes. He came down, and our lips met in a sweet story of exploration. All these years I'd been hiding away from guys, claiming I was too dedicated to my sport to pursue a relationship, and this was what I'd been missing out on, his amazing feeling of floating and falling and leaping and soaring. Gabe pulled back for a moment, pressing his forehead to mine, before he kissed me again. This time he was more insistent, gathering me closer as if he couldn't hold me tight enough. I fitted myself to him and dug my hands into his hair. The scents of coconut and men's body wash mingled as we slowed down again. I held on to him, one hand on the back of his neck, the other over his heart, which was beating so fast. Suddenly, the room flooded with light. "Hoo-hoo-ah!" James laughed and pointed at the two of us. "Busted." I ducked my head, burying my face in Gabe's chest. He didn't let me go. Instead, he wrapped his arms around me in a protective embrace. "Give us 5 more minutes." James cracked up, but he shut the door. My teammates were hooting and hollering. I'd bet my mitt Violet was glaring daggers at me. I'd never live this down. I'd be forever known as the girl who made out with Gabe Washington at the annual party. Oh my gosh, I'm going to die. Gabe hooked a finger under my chin and brought my lips up to his. He gave me a soft, sweet peck. "There's a back door." "What?" I was so confused. He tipped his head. "There's a back door. Let's get out of here." There went his smile again, warming me all over. "Unless you want to stay and hang out with everyone?" "No. I only came for you." The words were out before I realized how raw and exposed they made me feel. I held my breath, waiting for his response. I wasn't one to trust easily. My dad lied to avoid conflict, which created all sorts of trust issues in my life. I wanted to trust Gabe with my heart and my kisses. I wanted him to be the kind of guy who would protect me when I was at my lowest. So far, he'd shown himself to be a gentleman by keeping my batting practice a secret, going out of his way to help me be better, and by the way he cared for his brother. My gut said he was trustworthy, but my heart was in my throat waiting for his response. "Summer." He breathed my name. "You amaze me." I released my breath. "Come on." I'm parked down the street. "Let's go to the burger bar and get some ice cream." I just don't want to let you go." "That's fine by me." We crept to the door and figured out the lock by the light of my phone. Seconds later, we ran down the street, holding hands and laughing at how shocked James would be when he opened the door and we were gone. Who cared what the gossips said tomorrow? I was with Gabe, holding hands, trading stories, and kissing between spoonfuls of mint chocolate chip ice cream. Chapter 14. Gabe, what's your favorite candy bar? Me, a Charleston Chew. Gabe, I think my grandma eats those. Me, haha. Their longevity on the market means they must be the best out there. Gabe, or they're made with plastics and don't have an expiration date. Me, sticking my tongue out at you. Gabe, laughing. Wish I could see that. I sighed as I set down my phone. Sunday afternoon crawled by as I was supposed to put the finishing touches on my science worksheet, but I couldn't think about much besides Gabe. It didn't help matters that he kept texting me random questions. Gabe, if you could rid the world of one thing, what would it be? Me, the caps lock button. Who uses it? Angry people. If we got rid of the caps lock, the world would be a happier place. Gabe, smiling face, if you could have an endless supply of any food, what would it be? Please don't say Charleston chews. Me, orange chicken from the China Cafe. Gabe, oh so good. Me, you know it. You? Gabe, ham-fried rice to go with your chicken. Oh my gosh. Could he be any sweeter? I melted into my seat and swiveled it back and forth with my toes, a dreamy look on my face. How did I know it was a dreamy look? Because I was lost in La La Land with a hunky baseball player eating orange chicken and rice with chopsticks. Gabe, gotta go. Dad's making me work. Me, K. After 5 more minutes of mooning over Gabe, I finally knew what that phrase meant. I was able to look over my worksheet. I finished the rest of the questions on the formation of a supernova. Blowing out a breath, I hit submit. What was going to be, would be. Grabbing my empty water cup, I headed to the kitchen for a refill. I still had 20 math problems and a social studies sheet to fill out. Mom and Kaylee were sitting on the couch. I glanced at the television to see what they were watching, but it wasn't on. Confused, I looked a little closer. Kaylee had red around her eyes and a pile of crumpled tissues in her lap. Mom's arm was around her, smoothing her hair down. I blinked. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen Mom just hang out on the couch with anyone. What's up? I set my cup in the sink and went back to the couch, my hands on my hips. Kaylee ducked deeper into Mom. You tell her. Mom nodded, still running her hand down Kaylee's hair like she was an 8-year-old instead of an 8th grader. Kaylee's decided not to try out for the high school team. I looked at the two of them, all cozy and conspiratorial. And you're okay with that? I directed my question at Mom. She nodded slowly. I think it will be good for her to branch out and try new things. Like what? A hot burn began at the base of my neck. She can do anything she wants to. Mom kissed Kaylee's hair. My girl's pretty amazing that way. Hold up. I worked to grasp a thought. There were several bumping around inside my head, and I couldn't get them all out at once. Kaylee is seriously good. She's the best I've seen her age. She will make the team. Kaylee sniffed. But I don't want to. Why not? Because it's too much, okay? She threw herself forward, her arms out and her eyes hard. I hate it. I hate getting sweaty every day. I hate getting up early for practices and having to stay up late to wash my uniform. I hate tournament days and playing in the sun, powering through when I'd rather be anywhere but on the mound. I gritted my teeth. She'd pretty much spat upon everything that I loved about softball. I decided to switch tactics. You can't hate it and be as good as you are. Part of you has to love it. None of me loves it. I'm worn through. Call it burnout, call it whatever you want, but I'm done. She jumped up and ran to her room, slamming the door behind her and rattling the ancient family pictures on the wall. I tried to talk reason into my mom. You can't let her quit. She needs ball to get into college. She has perfect grades. Her brain will get her into college. Mom pressed her palm into her forehead and then began making small circles on her temples. Fine. But she could get a scholarship for ball. They'd pay for everything at Nebraska. Mom shook her head. She can also get a job and save money. She'll have time now. I shook my head. I can't believe you're letting her quit on herself. She's not quitting on herself. She's making a mature decision about her future. She's quitting. Just like you and Dad did. Mom's hand went still. What did you say? I swallowed. I said you and Dad quit on your marriage, and now you're feeding Kaylee some kind of bull story about how making mature decisions for her happiness is better than sticking it out. Mom opened and closed her mouth. Baby girl, we tried everything to save our marriage. I shook my head. I couldn't believe it. If I did, and they still couldn't get along, then everything I'd been through because of their divorce was on purpose. They had to have messed up somewhere, because right decisions don't hurt other people this badly. We were getting off topic. I'd give my left leg to have Kaylee's talent. If you've come to any games this year, you'd see how good she really is. The promotion is more important than your children. I know. We got that message loud and clear. I stomped to the garage door and yanked my keys off the hook. I'm going to the cages. I'll be back later. I bit off the last of my tirade. I'd already said too much. Funny, every word was honest and true, and yet I didn't feel any better. Home Run Park was full of families spending a fun Sunday afternoon together. Gabe was behind the counter, helping a little girl decide between cheap plastic princess sunglasses and 5 Jolly Ranchers. My money was on the glasses. If Gabe told her she looked cute in them, she'd wear them for the next 5 years. Mr. Washington was there too, getting a family ready to hit the arcade. He smiled at me as I got in line behind the little girl. I nodded in return, my face warming. This was the first time I'd seen Gabe's dad since Gabe and I kissed. I rubbed my forehead, checking to make sure the words I lip-locked with your son weren't etched into my forehead. I prayed I wouldn't have to speak to him. I was a bundle of nerves and a mess of family issues right now. I'd probably blurt something out about how great Gabe's neck smelled or something. I dug through my gear bag and came up with the necessary $15 to rent a cage for a half hour. Gabe was so sweet with the little girl, so kind and encouraging, that it made me feel like a total jerk for having been so mean to my mom. I knew he wasn't perfect, but he sure seemed like it right now. The little girl scampered off wearing her new shades and preening like a princess. Gabe grinned as I stepped up to the counter, and my heart did jumping jacks. Hey, Summer. What brings you in today? He leaned over the counter, looking all hot and inviting. I darted a look at his dad before clearing my throat. I need a cage. I plunked the bills on the counter. Gabe stared down at my money for a moment. He lifted one eyebrow and leaned closer. His dad was busy selecting putters for another family. What's up with this? I need to hit something. I threw my thumb over my shoulder indicating my gear bag. Both his eyebrows shot up. Rough day? I gave him a quick rundown of the afternoon, leaving out the parts that made me look especially horrible. I just need to blow off some steam. I totally get it. I'll start up cage 2. His hand rested on mine for a brief moment, giving me a feeling of headiness. Then he slipped the money into the drawer and winked. She's all yours. Go easy on her. I smiled for real for the first time in over an hour. Not a chance. I winked. He grinned. Those articles are paying off. I felt reckless and saucy. Turning, so I was looking at him over my shoulder, I said, maybe I was a natural all along. Leaving him wanting more, as the articles said to do, I sauntered off to cage 2. Once I was inside and had my helmet on, I hit the go button and squared up to the plate. It was time to kill a few balls. The first one flew off my bat with a satisfying ting that made my hands sting. I hit the next and the next, not letting up until the light went red. Still feeling restless, I was about to dig through my bag again for more money, a fruitless effort, as I'd had to pay with 2 5s and 5 1s earlier, when a buzzer went off and the light went green. I searched for the reason and found Gabe in the machine, loading balls into the feeder. He gave me a chin jerk, letting me know that he'd restarted my time. Why I'd ever thought boyfriends were a distraction was beyond me. Gabe hadn't asked me to be his girlfriend yet, but if he was always this great, I'd say yes in a heartbeat. Chapter 15. I made it to English class before Gabe. Funny how his schedule suddenly factored into my life. Bailey glared at me from her seat. You were supposed to give details. I know. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my fist. We ditched the party together and went for ice cream. That is not details. She stomped her foot. That's a summary. Come on, I don't want the Cliff's Notes. I want the Nova Special. I laughed, sorting through the events that had led up to the mudroom kiss. I had to come up with a better name than that before I started talking, or it would be shortened to the mud kiss. Not cute. Well, I walked into the party and everyone was blown away by the new moi. I brushed a hand down my outfit. I'd picked the red maxi dress to wear today. I know, I'm a total hypocrite for wearing her gifts after telling her off the day before. She'd been gone when I got home last night and then left for work early this morning. At some point, she was going to call me into her room for a chat. Hopefully we both calmed down before then. Except I was always going to be angry about the way things turned out for me. I didn't ask to be born into this family, to be born first and have all the responsibility dropped on me because my parents couldn't keep it together. Yep, hypocrite. My gaydar perked up and I glanced over my shoulder to watch him walk into the room. We weren't officially dating or anything, so I didn't expect him to change seats in class. At most, a wink and a wave would be expected after the weekend. I waved. He veered off course and dropped his backpack by the desk next to me. Hey! Did you get everything out of your system last night? Yeah. I smiled. Thanks. Then I guess it's safe to sit here. He took the empty chair and leaned over to talk to Bailey. Dude, don't tick her off. Bailey giggled. Don't I know it? I wanted to smack her arm and tell her to get a hold of herself, but I couldn't blame her. Gabe's glorious brown eyes had that effect on every female. I shrugged. The bell rang, cutting off any conversation. Mrs. Banks gave a brief summary of our reading and then headed towards her desk. I'll be meeting with a few of you today to discuss your essays. Summer, let's start with you. I pointed to my chest, throwing on a look of disbelief. My essay on the trapdoor called Marriage was flawless. I brushed my hand over Gabe's arm as I passed. He looked up at me with a knowing grin on his face. I liked that grin. It was the same one he got right before he kissed me. I blushed and hurried across the room. Summer, you turned in an essay that was only half done. My euphoric Gabe-induced cloud brain came back to earth. No, I didn't. I leaned over her desk in an effort to see the screen. Maybe only half of it loaded? She scrolled to the end of the doc, and there was my final sentence. It seems to be all there. I ran my eyes over the text, looking for a hole or a missing paragraph, all to no avail. That's what I was afraid of. You made a compelling argument for the downside of marriage, but you didn't offer the counterbalance, the good things that come from getting married. She adjusted her glasses. As it stands, I can only give you a C. Yikes. But that will lower my overall grade to a B- at best. That's assuming you ace every test until the end of the semester. I drew my eyebrows down. For an English teacher, she had an uncanny grasp on math. I'm willing to give you an extension. You have until Thursday to research the long-term benefits of marriage and rewrite the essay. I nodded like a bobblehead. I can totally do that. No, I couldn't. Tryouts were Thursday. I planned to oil my mitt tonight and get it looking good. And then my bat needed new grip tape. I had a small hole in my practice pants I should fix. There were things to do. But grades were important too. I'll have it to you by Thursday. Sounds great. And good luck at tryouts this week. I paused at her words. Why do you say that? Did you hear something in the teacher's lounge? Am I going to need luck to make the team? My hands hurt. I glanced down to see my knuckles white as I gripped the edge of her desk. I haven't heard anything. She shooed me back off. Stop worrying so much. When someone says softball, we all think summer. You're the heart of the team. I put my hand over my rib cage and willed my heart to slow down. I was all keyed up for nothing. The coaches loved me. My swing was back on, thanks to Gabe. And my reflexes were as fast as ever. I just needed to hold my grades together, balance whatever this thing between me and Gabe was, avoid a long and drawn-out heart-to-heart with my mom, and stay focused on my goal for a few more days. Then life would even out. I hoped. Chapter 16. The basement was full of girls in knickers and long socks, indoor shoes, and infield masks. No one wanted to get a black eye 3 days before tryouts. Several of the freshmen were in the area called the field, warming up their arms. They wore shirts from last year's softball summer camp or their accelerated ball jerseys. They hadn't been to winter workouts because their season was still underway, but the week of tryouts they were encouraged to attend to become familiar with the coaches and other girls. It was an odd feeling for everyone, because you didn't want to get too close to someone in case they were cut. Not to mention the girls you worked out with were trying out for your same position. The friendships formed were shaky at best. I joined Maisie as she ducked under the safety nets. We'd warmed up together every day for years. Maybe it was our good luck ritual, or maybe we were comfortable with each other and falling back into a familiar pattern felt good when there was so much uncertainty in the air. While cutting a senior didn't happen often, the coaches had taken younger girls who showed potential over a senior who hadn't improved her game. Maisie and I kept our conversation casual as we threw the ball back and forth. She told me what happened at the party after Gabe and I had taken off. Everyone was confused, and then they'd blown our disappearance off and gotten back to the game. She'd ended up in the mudroom with Evan Rasmussen, but they'd agreed it was weird to kiss, since he was her brother's best friend and all. So they had thumb wars until the timer went off. A few of the freshmen whispered and looked my way. I smiled, and the one with coppery red hair and freckles spoke up. "Are you Summer?" "That's me." "Is it true Coach Mackenzie thinks you're on drugs and wants you off the team?" It was a testament to my softball skills that I didn't drop the throw Maisie lobbed my way. I expected there to be some talk, what with the way Coach had singled me out here and there. I just didn't think it would be so off base. I snorted. "Where'd you hear that one?" The girls exchanged worried glances, but the redhead was bold. "Violet." I threw the ball and tucked my mitt under my arm. I was done warming up. "Consider the source, ladies." "Are you calling her a liar?" asked the blonde with pigtail fish braids. Her big blue eyes were deceptively wide and innocent. The slight sneer on her lips told me she was one to watch out for. "I'm telling you not to believe everything you hear, especially from the girl who wants my spot." I leveled them with a knowing look and watched the understanding dawn. They knew what some girls would do to get playing time. The rumors. Hiding enhancement drinks in gear bags and tipping the coach off. Misplacing uniforms before the game. I'd seen it all, and they probably had too. "Come on." I jerked my head for Maisie to follow. "I feel like crushing a ball." "Let's start with batting today." She grinned. "Later, girls." Her words dripped with senior sophistication and an understanding well beyond their 9 short years of school. That's right, we were almost 18 and graduating. Needless to say, I crushed it at BP. But that didn't mean I was going to let an opportunity for free time with a pitching machine pass me by. Besides, having the home run park and Gabe all to myself was pretty great. So, as soon as the coaches called an end to our workouts, I headed across town. The parking lot was empty, except for Gabe's truck. I pulled into the spot next to him, already thinking about our kiss goodbye. With Gabe, every kiss was bone-melting. And I couldn't get enough. We went through the regular routine of him setting up the cage and me hitting for a while. The latch on the door rattled, and I turned to find him stepping inside. Butterflies swarmed my stomach, and I leaned on my bat. "What's up?" He rubbed the back of his head. "I was just wondering if you wanted a little more power in your swing." I couldn't help the grin that pulled my lips apart. "You were just wondering that, huh?" "Yep." He rocked forward on his toes and then back on his heels. It was so darn cute, I could have used that moment to sell puppies. "Okay. Bring it on, Obi-Wan." His arms dropped and he sauntered over. "Line up in the box." This time when he put his arms around me from behind, I didn't pull away. I could hear his heartbeat, and it was as fast as mine. I was breathing like I'd run a mile and needed to chill. It didn't take an online article to tell me that hyperventilating wasn't going to draw in the men. Why don't you swing? His voice jumped at the end. I loved it. Loved knowing that I was having as big of an effect on him as he was having on me. That was pretty amazing. I swung as normally as I could with his arms around me. He moved his hands to my hips. You need to turn on the ball. He rotated my hips and my breath hitched. That's it. I moved back to the starting position and did it again. I had no idea what my body was doing, it was followed his lead without asking permission. I was pretty much Play-Doh in his hands. He could have made me do a cartwheel and I would have been happy to flip head over heels for him. He dropped his chin to my shoulder. Thanks for helping me enjoy the game. I've had fun rediscovering it with you. Me too. His phone buzzed. He let me go and pulled it out of his pocket. Eli? I asked. I couldn't help but ask, his frown was too sad. He's blowing me off to jam with the guys. In other words, he was getting drunk. Can you call your dad? Or your mom? He shook his head and shoved his phone back in his pocket. They're out, some golf course dinner or fundraiser or something. Sorry. I wish there was something I could say. I'm so frustrated with Kaylee, and it doesn't even compare with what you're going through with Eli. He hit the off button on the wall. We're quite the pair, aren't we? I really liked the sound of that. Pair and we were definitely words I wanted to hear describing the two of us. Do you mind if we still cut out of here fast? I have a ton of homework. Me too. I need to do some research so I can rewrite that essay. I was still irked about having to figure that out, especially with tryouts looming. Hey! Gabe stopped and reached for me. I slid into his embrace, tucking my head under his chin. How about you head home and work on your essay and I'll clean up tonight? Not on your life. I'm no mooch. He hugged me close. I was hoping we could call it a date. Date? I leaned back and tipped my head up so I could make eye contact. Yeah. I want to take you out, for real, but with everything we've got going on. I hugged him back. This is the exact kind of date I would pick if I had to pick a date. He cupped my cheek and gave me a quick kiss. Me too. After he walked me to the door and gave me another kiss goodbye, this one longer and more breathless, I headed to the school to pick up my sisters. Scratch that. Not sisters, but sister. Just Grace. Kaylee had taken the bus home. We still hadn't made up. As good as things were going with Gabe, my family life was falling to pieces. I could fix it all. I just needed to stay focused on ball long enough to make the team, and then I could think about smoothing things over with my mom and Kaylee. Chapter 17. Grace was late getting out of her practice, and so we got home after dark. Plus it was my night to cook dinner. By the time the dishes were done and I got a moment to look at homework, I had to do some serious prioritizing. I fell asleep with Of Mice and Men in my hand and woke up to the book digging into my face. Needless to say, study hall was a huge blessing. I put on headphones, the universal sign to the rest of the class that I didn't want to talk, and buckled down in front of a computer. A quick Google search on the positives of marriage brought up a variety of articles. Oddly enough, the financial benefits of being married were listed first. As if people really took a look at their bank balance and said, you know what would help this out? Getting married. Marriage is the answer to my financial woes. Not once had a wedding announcement come in the mail with the words, "We're so pleased to announce the joining of the bride's and groom's earning potential." I may be a touch cynical. Digging deeper brought up articles about the health benefits of having a long-term mate. The statistics were surprising. Apparently, marriage adds years to your life. I guess that could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how happy you were in the marriage. Like, if I loved my husband, I'd be glad to have a few more years with him, but if I didn't like the guy, then those extra years would be purgatory. One article said that having heart disease reduces a man's life expectancy by 6 years, but being single reduces it by 10 years. Finally, I hit upon information I could use and identify with. It said that a married couple has twice the talent, twice the time, and twice the labor pool to accomplish the tasks necessary for everyday living and surviving. Before my dad left, he and Mom split the household jobs. Dad did the laundry and Mom cooked. They both cleaned, so the house was taken care of. Once he was gone, I had to step up and take over his half of the work. The girls chipped in too and took over what Mom used to do too. She still went food shopping, but it took 4 of us to accomplish what one married couple had been able to do before. Dad had always been the one to help us with homework. He'd stay up and review my spelling list until I had all the words right. I was always so proud of those 100% S. So, when it came to raising a family, I could see the benefit of having 2 functioning adults at the helm. Take me and Gabe, for instance, not that I was even thinking of us getting married. No way. But, as a couple, we could get some major stuff done. Like last night, when he'd cleaned up so I could focus on homework. That was pretty awesome. I was already racking my brain to come up with a way to help him. So far, I was a blank, but it would come. I spruced up my essay, adding in footnotes to the article and trying not to think about how fun it would be to raise kids with a guy who loved ball as much as I did and could win championships for his kissing abilities. Chapter 18. The coaches give everyone the night before tryouts off. Gabe's dad wanted him to rest up before he had to throw, so he got Gabe's shift covered. The softball and baseball teams all met up at the Luigi's for pizza. Maisie and I arrived early and took a booth by the door. The smell of garlic and pepperoni drifted out from the kitchens. Lucas Addington came out, a red apron tied over his jeans. I hadn't spent much time getting to know the new kid, but he seemed nice. He was dating Charlotte, the girl who worked at the bread basket. They were a cute couple. "How are you doing tonight?" he asked. "We're great." Maisie picked up a menu. "I'm giving you fair warning that this place is about to be flooded." Lucas nodded. "I'll throw in a few pepperonis. Better add a couple meat specials too. The guys will be here." "Thanks." He took our drink order and headed back to the kitchen. It didn't take long for the place to fill up. Tommy and Roan came in together. Maisie leaned over so our conversation wouldn't be overheard. If Roan would open his eyes, he might see that his best friend was a knockout. Maybe. If he hasn't made a move by now. I rolled my eyes and London and Violet came in with Tommy. They looked right at our table and headed the other direction. Whatever. I wasn't going to let Violet's snarky mood ruin mine. In a blink, Gabe was sitting next to me, his thigh right up against mine and his arm around the back of the booth. I was getting used to the curious looks people gave us, like they couldn't quite figure out the matchup. A couple of weeks ago, I would have been right there with them. But Gabe and I fit. It didn't matter that his family made more money than mine or that his car was 20 years newer. We worked. We were all laughing at Evan, who was sitting just as close to Maisie, as he recounted the accidental bunt that had gotten him a double in the final game last year. No one had luck like Evan on the ball field. If a throw-out was close, the second baseman missed the dig. If the ball was on the line, it bounced up and over third, being called fair, flustering the left fielder, and allowing him time to run through first. So my baseball angel must have been off duty, because I was swinging for the fences, he mimed swinging the bat. But the ball drops 3 feet in front of home plate and dies. I glanced at Gabe, enjoying the crinkle around his eyes. The stress of his brother wasn't anywhere to be seen tonight. I didn't dare ask where Eli was or how he knew he was safe. I didn't want those crinkles to go away. "Summer Snow, you are such a liar." Kaylee stood at the end of the table, her hands on her hips and her face bright red. The table went quiet, poor Evan's story evaporating like steam off a fresh slice of sausage pizza. "Kaylee," I hissed as I shoved Maisie out of the booth so I could exit too. "What are you doing here?" She jabbed her fist into her hip. "Don't turn this on me." I grabbed her hand and pulled her out of the restaurant. For her part, she dragged her feet the whole way, making my job that much harder and making the two of us look all the more ridiculous. As we were pushing through the door, I caught Gabe getting to his feet. As much as I adored the guy, I wasn't ready to drop him in the middle of my sister drama. Are you crazy? I released Kaylee and spun on her. Those are my friends. You mean your boyfriend? How long were you going to lie to us? Boys are a distraction you don't need. Her voice went up 3 octaves in a horrible impersonation of me. Her hair flip over her shoulder was spot on, though. They are a distraction. I threw my hands up. But you can handle it and we can't? Her lower lip pouted out and her eyes spit fire. I'm a senior. I've had more experience. I don't let a guy throw me for a loop. She grunted. Please. You were tripping over your tongue in there. I was not. I've got this under control. I wiped my sweaty hands on my hips. You're the one all over the place, starting fights in the middle of a pizza place. She rolled her eyes. You're only fighting because you know I'm right and you don't want to admit it. You embarrassed me. You want to control my life. That's not true. I'm so sick of having to do everything just like you. You're not the golden child you pretend to be. She poked me in the shoulder before storming off. Gabe held the door open for her and came outside, his hands in his pockets. How much did you hear? I asked, running my hand through my hair. It was really loud inside, so only about 3/4 of it. When you guys yelled, it was pretty clear, he joked. Oh, good. Perfect. I rubbed my arms, so angry at her for calling me out in front of everyone. Like Gabe and I were all that serious. We'd kissed a couple of times and been on one semi-date. She was the one who had all of high school ahead of her. How was she going to make her mark? All the work I'd done to earn a reputation for our last name in the softball program, and she kicked dirt on it. She thinks quitting will get her a social life and all things that glitter. At least she's not drinking. Look, I know my problems aren't as big as yours, but I need a minute, or maybe even a week, to be mad at my sister. Gabe reared back. I was trying to add some perspective. Kaylee's accusations were still banging against my brain. It sucks what you're going through, but don't try to make me feel bad about wanting what's best for my sister. Why do you think you know what's best for her? Because I've been where she is. And it was scary and hard and I wished I had someone there to show me the way, but my parents were too busy fighting over who got the house to notice. Blood pumped loudly through my veins, roaring in my ears. He nodded slowly. Maybe she's adjusted to the divorce. Maybe she's not as scared as you were. Why was he all over me on this? It wasn't like he had divorced parents. He'd never hidden behind the couch while they argued. He'd never heard his dad say that he didn't want custody, because what the heck was he going to do with 3 little girls? Even thinking about it made my hands shake and my lungs constrict. I couldn't breathe, and I was paralyzed by the fear. It was like I was back behind that couch, unable to move away or even lift my hands to cover my ears. I can't take advice from you. Your brother needs help, Gabe. All you're doing is enabling him. His eyes widened and his jaw went hard. I'm not talking about Eli, right now. We're talking about you and Kaylee. Wrong. We're done talking. I met his hard gaze with one of my own. I couldn't believe he thought he had the right to tell me to back off my sister. If that's the way you want it. I do. I folded my arms against the chill. Spring was at the door, but winter wasn't bowing out kindly. Good luck at tryouts, summer. He ground the words out through gritted teeth. You too, Gabe. I flounced to my car where I fell into the driver's seat. My hands shook uncontrollably. It didn't take long for hot and salty tears to flood my eyes, making them sting. I gasped for breath over and over again until I could inflate my lungs big enough to satisfy my need for oxygen. A round of anger surged forth, and I hit the steering wheel. I was so trapped in the past and the fear that I needed to get away. I turned on the car and pulled out of the parking lot, not really caring where I was going. I drove until the car dinged that I was low on gas. I shook my head, not even remembering how I'd gotten one town over. I could have run a red light and I wouldn't have known it. I swallowed and made my way into the local gas station. I used Mom's gas card to fill up and buy a soda. The bubbles burned the back of my throat, waking me up. My stomach protested the drink and I doubled over the steering wheel, moaning. Life was a mess, a big, crazy pile of sharp words and unmet expectations, mine and others. I glanced at my cell, wondering if I should call Gabe, or Kaylee, or Mom. Grace wasn't going to be too fond of me after Kaylee told her about tonight. Loneliness whistled into my heart like wine through a cracked window. And tryouts were tomorrow. I glanced at my phone. It was getting late. I needed a full night's sleep. Then my head would clear and I would know what to say to everyone to make this all better. I started the car and headed home. I didn't sleep well. Feeling awful for everything, I got up early and made breakfast burritos for my family. I left a note on the fridge saying that they were in the oven before jumping in the shower. Mom was driving the girls to school on her way to work. It was her way of taking some of my load on tryouts day. Which only made me feel worse and confused about everything. In short, I was not in a good mental place when 3 o'clock rolled around and tryouts began. Chapter 19. Summer, you're up. Coach Mackenzie gestured to the plate. For the past 3 years, we'd held tryouts on the field. I'd been counting on the grass and the dirt and the chalk to bring me a feeling of comfort that had deserted me last night. But a storm had rolled in off the ocean early that morning and flooded the field, so we were stuck in the basement. Not ideal circumstances for a tryout, but it was all we had. Because I needed one more thing to go wrong. I'd almost forgotten to resubmit my essay last night. Mrs. Banks had reminded me during class today, and I booked it to the library to use the computer during lunch. Which meant that all I'd had to eat since breakfast was the roll Bailey saved me from her lunch. Harper usually had power bars in her locker, but she was fresh out. I was hungry. I was preoccupied with a certain baseball player on the other end of the basement. And I felt abandoned by my sisters. Neither wished me good luck in person or through text. So, when Coach Mackenzie started lobbing balls over the plate, my head was nowhere near the strike zone. "Watch the ball, Summer," called Coach. I was trying. But being in the box, with the bat grip rubbing against my palms, made me think of Gabe. Thinking of Gabe made me think of the shocked and betrayed look in his eyes last night when I'd unloaded a card of crazy on him. "I'm on it. Throw another." My voice was unusually high from forcing the cheerfulness. Being at tryouts was like being on stage. No matter what happened, you kept the mask in place, you were positive, and you exuded confidence. She lobbed one in there, and I swung, fouling it off. "I'm throwing them slow, so wait on it. Wait on it. Wait on it?" I was waiting on this tryout to be over so I could fix my life. All I was doing was waiting. I wanted to act. But there was too much to take on at once. Too much for me to handle. I whiffed it. What if I didn't make the team? Those heavy, salty tears burned the backs of my eyes. I chopped my way through the rest of my turn, avoiding eye contact with the head coach watching from the sidelines. I wasn't much better behind the plate. Yeah, I was there, but my performance lacked the usual flair. I just couldn't seem to muster the energy I needed. It didn't help that Violet was right behind me in the drills. She squatted deeper, dug quicker, and threw harder, all with a smirk on her face. To say I was emotionally low would be a massive understatement. The coaches gathered us together at the end. "Great job today. Everyone put in a real effort, and we're excited about the potential that's here. Get some sleep, and we'll see you tomorrow." I slugged through the process of putting my gear away. Coach Mackenzie stopped by my bag. "Summer, I feel like I have to tell you. Your name's on the cut list." I nodded numbly. What else could I expect after my poor performance today? "Thanks for the heads up," I had a couple of options. I could pull a no-show tomorrow, and the girls would think I was cut because I chose not to try out. No one would believe it, but there would always be this question in their heads: what happened to Summer? Or I could come tomorrow and fail, once again, and face the humiliation of being cut from the team. So many options. I said goodbye to the girls who waved on my way out and drove home sweaty and drained. The first thing I noticed when I walked in the house was the smell of chicken and carrots. I sniffed the air again, sure I was mistaken. Mom was the only one who knew the recipe for her famous chicken and carrots. She never even told us girls when we were learning how to cook because, she said, every woman needed a signature dish. I had yet to find mine, but there was no mistaking Mom's. I went into the kitchen, feeling guarded and cautious. The last time we'd talked, I hadn't been kind. Hi. I went to the counter, keeping the sink between us. Her face brightened. Hi. What's going on? I flapped my hand around, indicating the dish warming on the stove and then moving to include her. I thought you had to work tonight. She swallowed as she moved a spoon through the batter she mixed by hand. I did. I got it off. Why? Because today was tryouts and I wanted to hear how they went. She lifted a shoulder as if it was no big deal. It was a huge deal. I ran around the counter and threw my arms around her. She dropped the spoon and hugged me back, fiercely. I'm so sorry, sweetie. I didn't mean to make you feel like you weren't important in my life. Her words burst open a dam of emotions and tears. I may have blubbered. A lot. I'm sorry too. I know you're stretched thin and there are so many demands on you. I should be better, do more to help. I meant it. Mom didn't need me adding to her already too full plate, and I'd acted like a spoiled teenager, copped an attitude, and pretty much stomped on her. You already do so much, baby girl. The memories that nickname brought up of the two of us snuggling on the couch with a book or playing catch in the backyard only made me cry harder. My shoulders shook and I gulped. I should have thought before I put so much responsibility on you. You've just always been so grown up, so mature. Sometimes I forget that you're a kid and you need to do teenagery things, not clean the house and run errands. I laughed and swiped under my eyes. Teenagery things? Like saying something stupid and regretting it? She smiled and wiped my cheeks. Yes, that. And like dating boys and going to parties and chilling at the beach. Talking with Kaylee about all she felt like she was missing out on made me realize how much you really had missed out on because you were taking care of them. There was a small sniff from the doorway. We both spun, still locked in an epic hug, to find Kaylee watching from the doorway. She bit her lip, her eyes luminous. I waved her over to join us. I'm sorry, Kaylee. She jumped into our hug, and we made room. Me too, she squeaked like a church mouse. She laid her head on my shoulder. This week, coming home without you here and then seeing what gets done when you're around. I didn't even see it before. I swear, if I had. I gave her a squeeze. You're pretty amazing too. Grace came bounding in and threw herself on all of us, wrapping us up as best she could. Can we eat? Mom laughed, bringing a sense of healing into the conversation. Her laughter, historically, meant things were going to be okay. I was good with that. I took a deep, cleansing breath and headed for the fridge to get the milk out for dinner. Grace snuck a look at me. So, does this mean we can talk about Summer's boyfriend now? Mom about dropped the serving dish as she took it out of the oven. Her what now? I cut my hand across my neck, warning my sisters off the subject. You don't have to worry about him, we kind of had a fight and aren't talking anymore. Mom frowned. Who is this kid? Gabe Washington, chorused Grace and Kaylee. Should I know him? Kaylee grabbed plates to set the table. He's only the star of the baseball team. He hit, 9 home runs last year. Mom let out a low whistle. How'd you guys get together? We sat down and I shared the whole story. At first, my eyes wouldn't lift off my plate. It was hard telling my sisters about my struggles with the game. To their credit, they didn't throw me under the emotional bus, or point fingers, or ridicule. Turned out I could handle their sympathy. I glossed over the mudroom kiss, still needed a better name for that, and didn't say a word about his alcoholic brother. I did tell them about the English essay I had to rewrite. So I added stuff about the health and financial benefits, but I'm still not sure it's going to get the grade I need. Kaylee played with the cooked carrots on her plate. Would you ever get remarried? She asked Mom. Mom nodded thoughtfully. I would like to, someday. Your dad and I got married before we really knew who we were. As we grew up, we realized we wanted different things. But I remember a sense of peace when we were first married. I think it came from being with someone I thought of as my other half. There was safety in that feeling, safety to love and be loved. To explore the world and have a safe place to come home. We were quiet for a minute. I glanced at the clock. I still had time before my deadline. I'm going to run in and add that to my essay. We'll do dishes, offered Grace. Kaylee nodded her agreement. And I'll wash your practice socks, said Mom. I smiled. I always wore my lucky socks to tryouts, washing them between. The fact that she remembered that was awesome. Thank you. I rushed to my room to add my mom's perspective to the final paragraph. I had just finished when Mom appeared in my doorway. Am I interrupting? Nope. I hit the button to make the monitor sleep. I just finished. Good. She came in and sat on the edge of my bed. I thought about what we talked about over dinner, and I wanted to ask you a question. Well, 2 questions, really. Shoot. Please don't ask about kissing. We'd made a lot of progress tonight, but there were some things a girl had to keep to herself. Who are you? I pulled my eyebrows down. What do you mean? I mean at your core. Who do you see yourself as? That's easy. A softball player. The sport was inside of me. I think it was written in my DNA or something. My thoughts of the future always included softball in one form or another. Then be the best one you can be. No matter what guys come your way. You be you and play ball, and if a guy fits in, then that's great. Gabe totally fits in. He gets it, the crazy schedule, the need to improve in all aspects of the game, and the slight obsession with it all. Slight? Mom teased. I grinned, but it wilted quickly. But I said something awful, and he's probably already moved on. You can always apologize. I need to. Even if he doesn't forgive me. We sat there for a moment in silence, letting the thoughts settle like dust particles. What was your other question? She tugged at her scrub top. I've been seeing a counselor for a while now. I wondered if you would go with me to a session or 2. She held up both her palms. It's really low-key. But I think it would help us work through some of the aftermath of the divorce. I thought about it for a minute. My careless words about Mom buying my affection must have hurt her even more than I'd thought. Blurting things like that out could mean I had some issues. Isn't that expensive? It's free through my job. She leaned forward and put her hand on my knee. I know we went through hard times. I've been working on healing, but you girls need to heal too. I didn't mean to hurt you in the process, but divorce can leave wounds. I choked back the tears. I'd cried enough for a year already. I'd be okay with that. She got up and hugged me. I'll make an appointment for next week, after things settle down and you have your game schedule. If I make the team. She winked. You'll make it. You're a softball player. Go in there tomorrow and act like one. I grinned back. Tomorrow, I was going to kill it at tryouts. And then, right after, I was going to find Gabe and apologize. He might not feel like hugging me after I was done, but at least he'd know that I was sorry. Of course, if he wanted to hug me, I wouldn't be opposed to that. Chapter 20. Friday afternoon came on quickly. I'd been psyching myself up all day, listening to encouraging coaches' speeches through the ages on YouTube. Mrs. Banks said she appreciated the changes to my essay and awarded me an A-, with points taken off because I'd had to redo the assignment. Sweet. I kissed the A and tried my best to ignore the guy sulking in the back of the room. My Gabe hadn't turned off because he was mad at me. If anything, it went on hyper mode. I had worked myself up to talk to him after class, but he was called down to the office before class was over. I put Gabe on a shelf in the back of my mind so I could focus on tryouts. Hey, Vi. I hung my bag on the hook right next to hers, bumping her things in the process. She grunted in disgust as a poof of dust came off my gear. We were starting in the catcher's station today. Oh, sorry about that. I smacked at the dust now settling on her bag. That's what happens when you actually play in games and not just in winter workouts. She sneered. I'll be there this year. You're losing your edge. I'd mentally prepared for this sparring match and had an answer ready. I hope you kept the receipts, because that gear will be in pristine condition when we're done with the season. I smacked my fist into my glove. You'd better hurry. Coach Hayes likes hustle. I jogged away having put on my gear while we were talking, the movement's all muscle memory. Violet scrambled to get her chest protector over her hair. I smacked mitts with Maisie as she jogged past, doing a warm-up lap with the infielders. Give me your worst, I called to the assistant coach as I went into position. She threw one over my head. I popped up and snagged it out of the air. Is that all you've got? I taunted good-naturedly. Hoo-hoo. Someone's feeling spicy today. She tossed another, this one with a crazy bounce. I threw myself behind the ball, keeping it in front of the base. Man. That felt so good. I grinned wickedly. You're going to have to do better than that. She shook her head at my spunk, but I happened to know she was a huge fan of spunk. The rest of the drills followed the same pattern. Violet began to fade 20 minutes in. Because of my goading, the coaches upped the intensity from the day before. The freshmen dropped out first, then a junior and the sophomores. Violet was next, panting heavily and walking like her legs were made of rubber. The rest of the juniors went down, and I was the last woman standing. The head coach finally had to come over and insist we move to another station. You bet, coach. I jogged over and put my gear away, grabbing my bat. Coach Mackenzie was waiting for me. How you feeling today, Summer? Much better, thanks for asking. I smiled wide. I felt 30 feet tall. Also, my legs were going to hate me tomorrow. But I had a weekend to recover, so pushing myself now was totally worth the gallon of icy hot it would take for me to walk. Throw me a curveball, would ya? She hesitated. I jogged out to her on the mound. Hey, I know I didn't show up to compete yesterday. I should have, and I take full responsibility for that. But you know me, coach. No one works harder, plays harder, or is better in a clutch situation. Yesterday was a fluke. But I worked it out, and it won't be a problem from here on out. She scratched her elbow. Okay. Show me what you've got. I jogged back to the plate. The other girls in my group had lined up along the netting to watch. I winked their way and got into my stance. When the ball came at me, I waited, watched, and swung with all my heart. Ting. It bounced off a pipe in the ceiling, calling out a solid double. Nice. Coach Mackenzie started her wind-up. I loaded my swing. I was back, baby. This game was on and I was swinging for the fences. The end of tryouts was kind of traumatic for me. I spent an inordinate amount of time organizing my gear. The coaches conferred for 20 minutes, having written the cut list the day before. This time was used for last-minute debates. Oh, how I hoped I was debatable. Wait, that didn't sound right. Still, I had to roll with it, because I was too nervous to come up with something else. The freshmen were individually pulled into an office with a coach first. Each was given the news, good or bad, in private. Then they went out the back door. That way, the girls waiting wouldn't see their reaction. Once the freshmen were out, they moved on to sophomores. Eventually, Coach Hayes called my name. I grabbed my bag and followed her inside, shutting the door behind me. My hands were moist and I couldn't stop tapping my foot. I really needed to stop, because my cleat made a tap-tap noise that was distracting. I hadn't been this nervous since freshman year. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You've been off. I thought you'd lost your stuff, but the effort I saw today was the old summer. You made the team. I hooped and threw my hands in the air. Thanks. Thanks so much. She ushered me out the back door. I danced in the hallway like no one was watching. Dang. It felt so good to know I had a whole season of games and practices ahead of me. Like Christmas and summer vacation rolled into one. I shook my booty, enthusiastically, I might add, until I heard someone clear their throat. I froze, one arm over my head and the opposite foot off the floor. My Gabe dar blared. I take it you made the team, he said, his voice all deep and perfect. I slowly straightened my body and tugged on my shirt. It was time to say those 3 giant words. If I could keep from passing out. Chapter 21. I did. I turned to face him. That pivot on my toes was the hardest movement I have ever made. I needed to see him, needed to try to smooth things over and take back the awful things I had said. But I didn't want to see hurt in his eyes, damage I had placed there. I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you so much, for everything. He cupped the back of his neck and shuffled his feet. I told my dad about our deal. My heart stopped. It's okay. He's cool. Really? I was trying to understand what universe I'd stepped into. I didn't see that coming. A smile played at Gabe's lips. Eli went back to rehab today. That's why they called me out of English. He wanted to say goodbye. He stared up at the ceiling. There was a whole moment in the principal's office with my mom and dad. That's big. I nodded. Without thinking, I added, I'm going to therapy with my mom next week. We're going to talk things out. That's big. I smiled. It feels big. I think you were right about Kaylee, and I'm sorry about the way I acted and the things I said. I had a lot of apologies to make. He brought his eyes off the ceiling. It's been a busy couple of days. I laughed nervously. I'm sorry I butted in. I stepped closer and threaded my thumbs under my bag straps. You were only trying to help. You're really good at that, helping, I mean. I chewed my lip. Are we good? He chuckled. Yeah. I think we're good. Phew. I swiped the back of my hand across my forehead. I thought you were going to prank me and tell me I had to clean toilets for a month to make it up to you. He snapped his fingers. Now that you mention it. I smacked at his arm. Stop. No adding provisions after the fact. He dodged my swipe, actually bringing himself closer to me. So, Bailey told me you have a no-dating rule. Holy crap. You were the guy who asked her why I didn't date? But that was months ago. He ducked his head. I may have had a slight crush on you for a while now. Shut up. I smacked his arm, twice. Why didn't you say something? Because you were so focused. I didn't think you'd be into me. Oh my gosh. You're Gabe Washington, you have to know how hot you are. He grinned. I do now. I laughed. My propensity of blurting things out might not be all bad. There were crinkles around Gabe's eyes that I hadn't seen in days. I reached out and brushed my finger over them. I missed those crinkles. He turned his head quickly, pressing a kiss to my fingers. I melted against him for support. My knees had officially gone weak. I missed you. I missed you more. I may have been a girl smitten by the hottest baseball player on the team, but I was still a hard-nosed softball player. That was so cheesy. I know. You make me say stupid things. His eyes lit up with a memory. I bought you something. He reached around and pulled a package of mini Charleston chews out of his bag. Yay! I tore into the box and popped one in my mouth. So good. Here, try one. I tapped one into his palm. He chewed slowly, learning the intricate flavor combination on chocolate and nougat. They're good. See? I danced. We started toward the parking lot together. I'm guessing you made the team? Yeah. Coach handed out schedules tonight. We'll get ours next week. That's the way softball worked. I can't wait to play on the field. Me neither. He hip bumped me. So, he dragged the word out. I know it's bad timing, what with it being the start of the season and all, but do you think you could carve some time out to be my girlfriend? I dropped the box of treats. They scattered across the floor. No way did he just ask me that. I stared at him, once again wondering if he'd actually said the words or if I had made them up. If this is a prank. He turned to face me fully, cupping my face in his hands. It's not. Are you sure? I feel like I'm going to say stupid things and mess this up. You won't. Or, if you do, we'll figure it out. I threw my arms around his neck. Being a girlfriend is a teenagerish thing to do. I kissed his cheek. That sounds like a good thing. I laughed. It's a very good thing. There's two problems. What? One, my mom's going to want to meet you. His brown eyes sparkled. It's okay. Moms love me. I stared into his eyes, thought back to the little princess he'd helped at the counter, noted my own pounding pulse, and decided he was probably right. 2, we have to come up with a different name than mudroom kiss for the first time you kissed me. His forehead wrinkled in an adorable way. You kissed me. I smacked his arm. Did not. Did too. He tickled my side. So we should call it summer goes after the hot guy kiss. My eyes grew wide. I knew you thought you were hot. He laughed easily. How about, his arms came around me and pulled me close. We call it summer's first real kiss. You should totally kiss me right now. I ran my nails up the back of his neck, threading them into his dark brown waves. He leaned down to press his lips to mine. I'd had a plan. A plan that was supposed to get me through high school without distractions. If I'd stuck to the plan, I would have missed out on kissing Gabe, practicing with Gabe, having my first boyfriend, and pretty much the best parts of high school. From this point on, I was going to grab onto my teenage years and have fun. I had the rest of my life to be a grown-up, but I only had a few more months to be in high school. I was going to make the most of them. After all, I had to make up for lost time. Come on. I grabbed Gabe's hand. Let's head over to the burger bar and share a mint shake. By that I meant eat a shake and kiss a lot. He gave me a goofy grin as if he knew exactly what I meant. Sounds good to me. Yes, it did. It sounded amazing. You've been listening to It's a Prank, a young adult romance novel. Written by Lucy McConnell. Read by Joyce Dymock.
We are back, and I want to know what you thought about It's a Prank. Did you enjoy the softball elements? Are you a softball fan now? Are you more into baseball? Or is there another sport that you would like to see a romance novel, YA romance novel from? I hope you liked the first person. This, because it's YA, it was written in first person, but I'm not opposed to writing adult romance in first person either. So let me know what you think about that in the comments below. Like, subscribe, do all those wonderful things. Thank you for being here. Remember that you are loved, and I will see you on the next audiobook.